Welcome to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid. A set of conversations about our government, our politics, and the kind of country we aspire to be. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath, on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Well, here we are in 2026, everybody, and I am glad you're here with me. And so we begin a year that will determine our future, and you know what? And the future of freedom everywhere. Because if the light goes out in America, it cannot long endure anywhere else. And what a way to begin. I mean, facing mounting opposition here at home and, desperate to distract the country from the pain of his economic policies, the dangers of his healthcare policies, the moral stink of his graft, and the looming shadow of his certain complicity with Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump launched an illegal war. I mean, I was stunned this morning. In an hour-long press conference, it just ended a little while ago, Donald Trump, he announced that America would be running Venezuela, that American oil companies would be taking over that nation's oil reserves and exporting oil to, Russia and to China, and anyone would buy it. Simply put, Donald Trump used the power of America's military not to protect us, but to steal another country's oil. Now, you know me, I want to be fair, and he offered some other reasons. For example, he claimed that Venezuela was responsible for America's fentanyl addiction, but that is a lie. That's not where fentanyl comes from. And he's killed 100 sailors in their little fishing boats to make that, in the name of that lie. He also said Nicolas Maduro is a dictator and a criminal. He's coming to U.S. to receive justice in American courts. Well, that part might be true. Nicolas Maduro is a dictator, for sure. Bad guy. And when Trump was asked at the press conference whether he would bring back the actually democratically elected president, Maria Corina Machado, he said no. He said no. The American armed forces simply replaced a homegrown dictator with an American one. At that press conference, Pete Hegseth, he crowed. I mean, I want to say it. I don't even know how to say it differently. He was practically orgiastically crowing with glee about the power of the United States military. And yes, it is a powerful military. But here's what Hegseth and Trump do not understand. And they will never be great because they don't understand it. Power itself is not a moral good. How we use power defines us. And using military power to push Nazis out of Europe, that was good. Using economic and scientific power to stop the spread of AIDS in Africa, that was good. Using diplomatic power to create a safer world that lifted billions out of poverty, that was good. For generations, America has used its power, not perfectly, but largely for good in the world. That era is over. Over. In the Trump era, we are conquerors, making colonialism great again. Is Cuba next? Is Colombia? How about Greenland? My God. Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, spoke at that press conference. He repeated the praise of the military and the, hymns to our dear leader as required. But he also said this mission was aimed at supporting a law enforcement action to bring the indicted Maduro to trial. That was interesting. One sentence, but he got it in, that all of that military complexity and power was used to protect the law enforcement agents who were exercising a warrant to arrest Maduro. That is a far cry from pacifying a nation to steal its oil. So there are a lot of unanswered questions, notwithstanding that press conference, and so little thought as to the realities on the ground. I mean, during that press conference, our president actually said, he tried to help Chicago by sending in his troops. I'm calling BS on that one. He didn't try and help Chicago. He tried to terrorize us. And that's now what is on offer to the Venezuelans. And you know what? He thinks they won't fight back when he tries to get oil from one end of the country where it is to the other end where the refineries are. Well, they haven't thought about it, and the idea is unthinkable. It should be unthinkable. It should be. But here's the thing. The forces of this corrupt would-be czar in the White House had a remarkable year in 2025, and we need to admit it. I mean, the Supreme Court and a supine Congress gave him time to consolidate power, and he took full advantage. The entire executive branch is his. His, not ours. And that means he can strike that. He does break our laws with impunity. Why? Because his Justice Department, not ours, now views law as a tool to punish enemies and protect allies. He has abused his powers to coerce hundreds of millions of dollars in legal services from law firms. He's abused his powers to force once proud universities to give up their independence, ceding control of research, of hiring, of admissions, and sometimes even of curriculum. He has demanded Republican states redraw legislative maps mid-decade to protect his majority in Congress, and many did. The President of the United States has shown such contempt for American history and values that this year, 2025, that he tore down part of the White House, added his name to the Kennedy Center, removed exhibits from museums, and used social media to espouse actual Nazi talking points. Sick. And you know what? People may not be fully aware of the scope of his power grab, the breadth of his crimes, or the ambition of his attack on our democracy because, you know what? He used the year to gain unprecedented control of the media, old and new. So here we are at the beginning of 2026. Donald Trump is the most powerful president we have ever had, and he plans on using that unchecked power to drive forward his hateful agenda in 2026. What is that agenda? Well, we know, right? It includes breathtaking graft, enriching himself, his family, and the would-be oligarchs who are happy to help him stay in power for promised riches. Remember his deal with those oil companies? $1 billion for his campaign, and he will be theirs. Heck, he'll even give them Venezuela. His agenda is cementing permanent one-party rule, punishing entire states for standing up to efforts to cheat on elections, as he did recently with Colorado. It includes eroding democracies around the world by supporting right-wing movements in those countries and by allying himself to Vladimir Putin. Himself, not us. By the way, and his agenda includes all that white Christian nationalist hate. The Supreme Court is considering ending birthright citizenship at Trump's request. And if they do, he will strip citizenship from 50 million people and engage in mass deportations on a scale not seen since the mass arrest, incarceration, and final destruction of Europe's Jews in the last century. He's targeting Latinos, but his allies are talking about a larger vision of an America where only white Christians are legitimate citizens. And Congress gave him the largest domestic police force in history, bigger than the armed forces of most countries, to carry out his evil work. This is what we face now as 2026 dawns. So we have to ask, do we have now, in this moment, do we have the strength, the courage, the assets to realistically stand up to all that power? Is it even possible to resist anymore? Well, for starters, we used 2025 to learn how to fight back. While he was using it to consolidate power, we were learning how to fight back. We organized, we protested, we educated, we litigated, we voted. We need to do more of that. We won impressive battles doing it. in lower courts. We stopped Trump from using prison to intimidate his adversaries. In case after case, whether it was James Comey or Letitia James or Kilmar Abrego Garcia or Mahmoud Khalil, Trump was either blocked or forced to release his political prisoners. We broke his stranglehold in Congress. It took the hideous Jeffrey Epstein scandal to do it, but even Republicans voted to force Trump to release those files. And they're going to have to continue to try and force him to do it. I don't think his refusal to comply or his war in Venezuela is going to give him cover. We want to know the answers. And in fact, the Epstein case proved to many of Trump's own former supporters that, Donald Trump sides with powerful abusers, not ordinary Americans. And that's a big blow for that persona. And you know what? We won elections. And we didn't just win them by squeaking by. We saw staggeringly large shifts in voter behavior. Americans are sick of this. And we have each other. We have each other. He doesn't. Last year, we turned out in protests large and small, in communities, in person, online, and here on the radio. Look, we let everyone who cares about American democracy and about American freedom know we are not alone. You are not alone. Trump is powerful, and he's coming for it all. But we are powerful, too. And you know what? Freedom has always been powerful. In the 18th century, the powerful British crown thought it could kill that will to freedom, but freedom prevailed. In the 19th century, rich enslavers thought they could crush the idea, but freedom had a second birth. In the 20th century, the Axis nearly conquered all of Europe and much of Asia before the forces of freedom and democracy woke. But when they did, freedom prevailed. And now we face the same old threat, the idea that a few people are better than everyone else, destined to rule over the rest of us, destined to take what they want, and we have to suffer what we must. And you know what? We took too long to see that threat, but we do now. So here we are, in the 250th anniversary year of this nation. Whether it stays or falls depends only on this. Can we match his desperation with our determination? Partly because of the conversations I've had with you, I'm convinced we can. And I have a great show for you today with wonderful guests. We're going to talk about all this and much more when we come back. Don't go away.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. I promised you a good show to start the year, and I'm thrilled to start it with Seth Kotler. He's a professor at Willamette University in Salem, Oregon. He's the author of a book on a book at least, maybe more. I only know of one, Seth, on American politics, when American politics was a new thing back in the 1790s. He's the man behind Rightlandia, a publication that puts, contemporary right-wing America in context. And he has been, for a couple of years now, a great guide to that part of America for everyone listening to this show. Happy New Year, Seth.
Thanks. Happy New Year to you, too.
Well, I thought we had some things to talk about, but overnight there was some news.
Yeah.
Well,
apparently we're doing regime change now.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. What was your reaction to all of that?
Well, it's sort of a shocking turn of events. Not entirely surprising. They've been sort of laying the groundwork for this for a while. According to Greg Sargent from the New Republic, no one in Congress was really notified about this ahead of time. So there was no congressional consultation whatsoever, it appears. So this was just a kind of unilateral act on the part of the president to invade another country and remove the president. And so, yeah, it's quite a dramatic and seemingly unconstitutional and illegal action on the part of the presidency, but that's kind of true to form in a lot of ways.
Right. I mean, in his press conference, he talked about how we're taking the oil and American oil companies are going to go back there and they're going to rebuild the oil infrastructure and they'll get paid out of the profits and they'll be shipping the oil all over the world to places like Russia. And I thought, my God, they didn't consult with Congress, but they consulted with the American oil industry. They planned this with them. I mean, that's how else can we hear that? That is, I mean, this is old school extractive colonialism like the world went through 150 years ago, much to the horror of the colonized and of the eventually of the colonizers as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, in that sense, it's just a sort of continuation of America's relationship to Latin America, going back to the late 19th century. So and I guess many of us thought that we don't do that anymore, and that was probably wishful thinking. But yeah, I mean, the idea that this kind of, he's invoked the Monroe Doctrine. A lot of his social media folks have been posting about Teddy Roosevelt as this great hero. And so, the way that this just kind of replicates America's extractive role in Latin America is, worth thinking about and sort of acknowledging. I don't think Trump or Pete Hegseth knows much about that history and see it as a legitimation for what they're doing. But it is very much a continuation of that. Yeah. And I mean, to me,
in my lifetime, Seth, in America, I don't want to puff us up. We made a lot of mistakes. But since at least World War II, America's power in the world has been, I think, largely a force for good. Certainly, it's very hard to be the most powerful nation in the world and not abuse those powers. But when you think about, like, okay, we pushed the Nazis out, we used our scientific power to, to basically stop the spread of AIDS in Africa. We put in place a global order that we certainly benefited from, but billions around the planet were lifted out of poverty. That era of benign use of power is over. And Americans can no longer, we've decided we're a conquering nation again. And I would put like Cuba, Colombia, and maybe Greenland on the watch list now. For these guys. I don't know how else to look at it. And it's all because they're crumbling in their domestic politics. Right.
Yeah, I'm sure that's part of what's driving it. I think there's also a vision of kind of international relations behind all of this that does have a logic, even though I find it kind of repulsive. But, it's a logic that basically any form of international cooperation is pointless, meaningless, that every nation should enter into their relationships with other nations in the same way that Donald Trump, say, would enter into any kind of business transaction, which is in a purely transactional, cynical way, assuming that the other people are out to get you and that you are out to get them. And it's a pure matter of just who's got, the most expensive lawyers or who's willing to say the most outrageous, threatening thing. Yeah, who's got the biggest army. And so, we will, and that's just the way foreign affairs, as they see it, has always worked. The idea that, the United Nations or other kind of international organizations actually have ever done anything of value and have created the possibility for greater peace and so on. They think that's just silly.
So that's them. You've done what I think nobody I know has the stomach to do, which is to really study the right wing in America over time. Is this phenomena of dealing with the rest of the world in the way you described, does it have roots in right wing thinking in our history?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's a great book about America First. Unfortunately, I'm blanking on the author's name right now, about basically the foreign policy of America First going back to the 1930s when that movement first emerged. And, American isolationists have almost always been authoritarians. domestically, and have almost always been kind of either accepting of or respectful of authoritarians around the globe. So, in that sense, there's this we've misunderstood American isolationism as a kind of pacifism. And there were many pacifists historically who also were opposed to American intervention around the globe. But the kind of right-wing America First types have tried to pass themselves off as lovers of peace, when really what they usually more often were just incredibly cynical people who had a very dark vision of human nature in the world, who just thought basically the world was about either being dominated or dominating other people. And therefore, if you don't want to be the one being dominated, you have to be prepared to impose your will upon other people. And this is both their vision of international affairs and also their vision of family life, their vision of domestic politics, their vision of race. And so to them, the idea that you could live in a multiracial, religiously pluralistic democracy was just hokum. It was just silly and impossible and didn't fit with human nature. And therefore, unless you were going to be a sucker, you had to be prepared to either dominate or be dominated.
So that's so interesting.
That view of the
power
world
is their dynamic. So naturally they're drawn to authoritarians because the only thing they respect is power.
Right, and to them, they're not that. They would. Well, I don't know if they would accept the term of authoritarian. They would just say they're being realistic, right? As they would see it, right? So they start from these presumptions about the way the world supposedly is, according to them, and then they act according to what they take to be the unchanging kind of rule of the world. And so it's hard to argue with folks who are coming from that place because they're just starting from a very different set of presumptions about what humans are like, how nations work, how foreign affairs can work.
Where does that take you, though? I mean, if you play that out, the only end of that is that some people rule and everybody else are enslaved.
Right. Right, and not surprisingly, a lot of the people who find this compelling are the people who are in positions of relative power and authority and are fearful of what will happen. I mean, it reminds me a bit of the way, like, for example, white supremacists in the 1960s looked at the civil rights movement and they were like, this is a movement of black people who want to dominate white people. And the civil rights activists were like, well, wait, no, we want equal protection under the laws. We want to be equal. But it was kind of inconceivable to those white supremacists that one could think that way because that was not how they thought about the world, right? So to them, they were like, I'm a white person, I'm in charge, I'm in a position of power, and that's right and natural and normal. And so if someone else is advocating for greater power, they must want to dominate me.
So to be clear, you're talking about the white supremacists in the 1960s and
right.
Donald Trump and his administration today.
I mean, to some extent. I mean, I think that's part of the logic. I mean, for example, this is where, transgender for everybody, he says, right? The idea that, like, trans kids are asking to be treated equally like anybody else and have access to healthcare like anybody else and have control over how they understand themselves and identify themselves just like any other person would. Donald Trump understands that as transgender people want everybody to be like them, which is not at all what trans people are saying, right? Wow. But it's kind of inconceivable to him because he thinks everybody should be like him, right? He thinks, like, to be straight is the only way to be. To be male in the way that he's male is the only right way to be. And therefore, if someone is critical of it, they must be telling him that he's wrong and has to change what he's doing and want to dominate them and want to force them to be different.
That's so
I think that's the way that works in his mind.
I mean, when I was a little boy, and I thought that being equal, I mean, I was barely thinking about it. I mean, as a little boy, meant that everybody was the same, basically the same. And as I got older, I understood that thought itself was a terrible thing, because it's the everybody isn't the same. Everybody's unique. They have their own, right? And celebrating that is what makes everybody equal. And allowing that is what makes everybody equal, not making everybody the same. And that's a journey that you go on in life when you start and you only know a little bit, and you learn, you encounter more and more. But he looks like he never did. Yeah. All right. So help me understand as I think politically, what are the what makes up the coalition that is right-wing America? And I want to explore, are there cracks in that coalition that we might now turn into chasms? But it seems like there's some strange bedfellows on the right.
Yeah, there are, and it's hard to, it's so hard to tell at this point for me, because so much of it seems to be bound up with people jockeying for media share, for audience share, and the Republican Party basically feels like a media operation that has a little storefront that is policy, but nobody really takes that seriously. Everybody knows that the real thing is whatever is happening in right-wing media, and which is an economic space where people are trying to carve out niches for themselves to kind of gain audience share. And so, what Candace Owens is saying about Charlie Kirk and Israel and the Jews is, I think she really means it. But I think she also recognizes that this draws a lot of attention to her, which then brings in a lot of money in the form of audience and attention. And then other people see that Candace Owens is getting a lot of attention, and so they start talking about Candace Owens, and they start differentiating themselves from her because they want to draw audience to them. And so a lot of it has the feel of a kind of professional wrestling, thing where just people are fighting with each other. But then once the cameras turn off, they all go to Tucker Carlson's Christmas party together and hang out, in Tennessee. So that's why, to me, and also most of the main figures in this are just profoundly cynical people who are unserious people who don't really care all that much about the welfare of the country. And so that's another place where I feel like our older ways of thinking about this, here's this particular interest group, that had a certain set of policy preferences that they wanted to see made real in the form of, labor policy or environmental policy or whatever it might be. Obviously those stakes are there and they matter, but within the Republican Party, can you name a bill the Republican Party has passed?
Maybe. I'm thinking about big tech and how it got radicalized. Because there were bills that that benefited crypto and AI and and other things there. So it's sort of that big tech world and that batshit crazy. Excuse me, radio. Sorry, Paul. I apologize. Bleep it. That crazy world that is the Candace Owens and just this repulsive social media crowd on the right. They're not exactly the same. They have slightly different interests. The folks jockeying to buy the media, Larry Ellison and crowd, and the guys who own Amazon. They're not quite the same set of interests. Those are economic.
No. Oh, for sure. Yeah. So that's a great point. And I think the crypto interest and the oil industry interests, the anti-climate change interests, obviously are kind of behind this, and that's in part why they fund, the Republican Party. But I guess, for me, a lot of the political culture of the Republican Party today is aimed at just basically thwarting and stymieing any institutions in civil society that would normally serve the function of engaging in rational, empirically based arguments about policy preferences. So the way that the oil industry wins on climate change is not by convincing people that their approach to climate change is the right way. The way they succeed is just by creating so much confusion and a lack of will and the ability to kind of act collectively that it just seems like, oh, well, there's just nothing we can do about it. And so it's not that like they've convinced the vast majority of American people not to care about climate change or not to believe that it's actually happening. They've just succeeded in like stymieing our ability to have to form a kind of national purpose and will to do anything meaningful about it. And, there's lots of stuff happening on the state level. And there are lots of, NGOs and other organizations that are doing work to try to kind of mitigate climate change and so on. So it's not as if nothing is happening, but their goal is to kind of capture the national conversation and the federal government and to just stymie it and make it not able to really do anything meaningful. And I think the same goes for the AI folks and for the crypto folks that, they just want to, they don't need the government to take positive action. They just need it to not do anything.
But I mean, I put myself through reading some of this man Curtis Yarvin's stuff.
Oh yeah,
because right? I mean, he is he thinks that we should not have a democracy, and he thinks right. He just says out loud, we need a. We need a CEO from the tech world to run America, and democracies will never be good for anybody. That feels different to me than our traditional right-wing stuff. But there's an arc there.
Yes, no, for sure. I mean, they've radicalized against the idea of American constitutional democracy as we've understood it since World War II. But again, I think this is where they run into a wall, which is that, Curtis Yarvin's ideas are just not popular. Like, they're popular with people who have a lot of money. They're popular with people who have a lot of influence in the Republican Party. They're popular with the folks at Claremont. In private islands. So they like these ideas. But if you try to sell them to the broader public, again, this is why I think, Curtis Yarvin doesn't have a popular podcast. There's a reason for that. Right. Candace Owens does. Candace Owens talks about television shows. She talks about whether, Macron's wife is really a man. She talks about just all kinds of crazy stuff that has very little to do with policy. And that's what the audience is kind of interested in, this kind of bizarre world of conspiracy theories.
And they're so these fights, like Nick Fuentes is on one side, and so you're basically telling me these fights are entirely performative, and they really don't care. They just want the ratings up.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I think Nick Fuentes really does believe in what he believes in. I think Tucker Carlson kind of believes the mask is the face has grown to fit the mask with Tucker Carlson. But at some level, I don't think that really I don't think that matters all that much, whether they actually believe it or not. To me, the problem is that the content of all of these people's podcasts and so on is content that is sort of incompatible with the kind of the functioning of a democratic, religiously pluralistic, multiracial democracy. That's what they're saying. So they're just normalizing this idea that, like, well, of course, white people don't want to live next to people who aren't white. Of course, if you speak English, you don't want to live in a neighborhood with someone who doesn't speak English. Of course, if some mysterious thing that you don't like happens, I mean, come on. I'm just saying maybe the Jews did it. I'm not saying they definitely did. I'm just, floating it out there as a possibility. And so all of this junk is just intended to just foster a sense of kind of resignation. Scholars, I think it was Hannah Arendt, who said that, the culture of authoritarianism is a world in which anything is possible and nothing is true.
It was Hannah Arendt. Yep.
Yeah, and so this is the kind of culture, climate that these folks are trying to build and seed. And in the process, what they say to their audience is like, everybody else is lying to you. So that's why you need to listen to me, because I'm telling you the truth.
And that's why they pretend that they don't like censorship, because they need space for their chaos. Right? And then they can censor the rest of us. Yeah.
Right. So they don't really care about the truth. Or, like, for example, folks on the right who are this is a very effective thing that I've started to see now, especially like in Oregon right-wing politics, where people will oppose what the Israeli government is doing in Gaza. And that's the way they're kind of going to reach out to folks who are, more independent, not bought into, America's historical foreign policy and our relationship with Israel. But they're not coming from a place of having any concern about Palestinians, the people in Gaza. In fact, most of these people are also like incredibly Islamophobic, right? So it's not coming from a place of solidarity with people who are suffering around the world and an opposition to like military violence being wielded by states like Israel. That's not where it's. But they're trying to tap into people who just kind of hate. Well, in some cases, they just hate Jews. But in other cases, they hate, these kind of authoritarian military operations, sometimes even American ones, right? So, some of these people will probably oppose what Trump just did in Venezuela. They won't completely separate from Trump, but they will oppose what Trump did in Venezuela. But they will do it not out of any sense of desire for the people of Venezuela to live in a more democratic society, or in regard to what's happening in Gaza, not because they care about what's happening to Muslim or Christian people in Gaza and they want those people to live better lives. It's just to kind of build audience share, right? To draw in people, whatever issue it might be. If, there's a bunch of disaffected young people out there who don't like what's happening in Gaza, great. Let's speak to them, tell them we're with them, and then you kind of draw them into your circle for your particular kind of political vision. But all of it involves just basically dismantling the possibility that we could work towards some sort of solution to what's happening in Gaza, or work towards some sort of, better situation for people living in Venezuela.
I don't think there's any working towards anything better anywhere in this administration. They break things for sure, but there's no day after plan. Gaza is not better off today. He's had 11 peace plans in Ukraine, right? The American healthcare system is not better off. I mean, they're congenitally unable to come up with a healthcare plan. I mean, it's been 11 years, so they okay. So they can, they sent their troops into my city. They didn't make it better, But they say, we made it better. We made it safer.
Right, but they produce all kinds of sizzle reels and content, right? That,
so how does democracy survive that?
Man, if I had the answer to that, I would be a much richer person than I am right now. I really don't know. And, this is where, as a historian, I don't know how much I can offer. It feels, especially the technological and communications piece of it, the media situation that we're in right now, to me just feels really hard to compare to kind of past situations that we've been in. And so I don't know how much of a guide, the comforting story would be, that for example, the rise of the second Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s and this kind of immigration restrictionist, Christian nationalist politics that emerged in the 1920s happened at the same time as the radio became a major form of communication. And then Father Coughlin used the radio in the 1930s to kind of build a kind of fascist. And so, in the same way that maybe what's happened in the last 15 years in terms of our media scape and technology are kind of comparable to the way that radio kind of scrambled American politics in the 1920s and 30s. But I don't know. So the happy version of that is we came out of that, and so we survived it, and it was kind of chaotic and wild, and then, but it's hard. I can't imagine what it looks like to sort of come out of this situation with a healthy national conversation. I don't know where that takes place. It certainly doesn't take place on X. The conversations on Blue Sky are a little bit better, but there's less than 1 million people there. It's that's not a national forum in any meaningful way. The legacy media like CBS has now basically been captured. And so it's the Washington Post. I don't know if you saw, they had a nice little editorial today celebrating Donald Trump's great triumph in Venezuela. And so, looking at those older models of, celebrating what the Washington Post did in terms of in the era of Watergate and it's worth celebrating. It's worth remembering. I don't think that's coming back. That model of what our journalism looks like. And so I wish I had better ideas.
Let's go to a different topic. But that's really interesting, and I got to think about that a lot. Well, you mentioned it before, but I think I want to learn more about, talk to me about anti-Semitism on the right. On the one hand, they're beating up universities supposedly to protect Jews. And they have some allies in the organized Jewish community because of that. But there's an enormous undercurrent of hate directed at Jews in that right-wing world that you were talking about. So, talk about it for me. I don't understand it fully.
Yeah. So, and I would distinguish between kind of anti-Semitism and criticism of the state of Israel and its current policies, right? Those are often connected, but not necessarily connected. So there are lots of Jewish people who are very critical of what Israel is doing in Gaza, who are not doing it from an anti-Semitic place, right? And me as well, right? Yeah. And I think that degree of confusion around the issue creates space for anti-Semites to pose as just good faith critics of the Israeli government, when actually what they're trying to do is to foment and foster anti-Semitism. And to me, there's a difference between ordinary anti-Semitism and extraordinary anti-Semitism. And so ordinary anti-Semitism would just be, stereotypes that people have about Jewish people, or using a slur in relationship to an individual, and that's bad. But extraordinary anti-Semitism is where the Jews become the explanatory, the force that explains everything. Why am I seeing commercials on my television where there are gay couples? Well, it's because the Jews hate homosexuality. They hate heterosexual people. They control the media. And so they are trying to brainwash America's children into becoming gay by putting these depictions on the television. So this is what the anti-Semites of the 1950s, 60s, 70s said about, so for example, when Roots went on television, the theory was Roots, the people who made Roots are Jewish. They are in cahoots with Black civil rights workers who are trying to get white people to hate themselves and to feel bad about themselves. And so the Jews are trying to undermine white people by crafting these shows that give a positive portrayal of Black people. And none of it has any basis in fact, obviously, but it's a conspiracy theory that explains to people who feel alienated from the kind of culture of multiracial democracy and religious pluralism that is emerging around them in this Cold War era. And it gives them an explanation for why this stuff is happening. Why can't we have a Christmas tree up in the school anymore? Why aren't all kids required to sing the Christmas songs in school? It must be the Jews who are doing it. And why are they doing it? They're doing it because they want to destroy Christianity, is the theory, right? And so anti-Semitism is the foundational conspiracy theory in a kind of American life and American right-wing politics. And so that's where I think the anti-Semitism and the conspiracy theories kind of blend together. And most of the conspiracy theories you might hear today aren't explicitly anti-Semitic. So they talk about globalists, or they talk about the Trilateral Commission, or they talk about the Bilderbergers or the Rothschilds, which is implicitly
anti-Semitic. Soros, or space lasers.
George Soros. Exactly. Yeah. Right. And so, or New York values, or Hollywood values, or, but all of it is a kind of, I can't remember who said this, but they referred to anti-Semitism as the socialism of fools. right? That like it's basically a way to explain why you have some hardship in your life, something is wrong in your life, either economically, socially, culturally, and it identifies a cause for it, a scapegoat for it, and it gives you a solution, right? What Hitler thought of as the final solution, right? If only we can just like dislodge these supposedly evil intended people who control everything from their positions of authority and influence, then we can get good people into those institutions who will no longer use those institutions to try to destroy you, but will instead use those institutions to help you. And so and it's always a false promise. But this is the kind of causal
So that's
logic
the anti-Semitism of the right. There's a different anti-Semitism on the left. It's a complicated, very big, complicated problem. But it seems like in contemporary American politics, the left and the right have joined forces on that one, and they're coming at it from different ways, right? And that's partly because of the state of Israel, but it's a dangerous moment for sure. Wow.
It is. I mean, and to me, I recognize that anti-Semitism is a dynamic that spans, lots of different parts on the political continuum. But to me, anyone who would embrace anti-Semitism, it's hard for me to understand how that person could authentically be considered a person of the left, right? Because to me, one of the defining features of the left is a kind of refusal to dehumanize entire groups of people, right? And to ascribe collective responsibility for people who were born into a particular subject position, right? That to me is one of the foundational things of what it means to be a left.
Then there's confusion amongst the left about that thing.
Yeah, right. No, I think anyone who would embrace that, who calls themselves a leftist, to me, I can't comprehend how they could be anti-racist and anti-Semitic at the same time. I just don't see how that works in their brains. But
so the right has wrapped itself in this protection of Christian values and Christian life, and yet you have their favorite AI tool, Grok, Elon Musk's tool, this week, owning up to the fact that they this tool illegally takes, images of teenagers off of Facebook, and if they're asked, makes them naked and do terrible things for the boys who ask them to do it. I mean, there are no consequences in our country for that now, are there?
Right. Yeah, it's really thinking about AI just makes me inconsolably despondent about the future, I have to admit, because it seems like this realm of the humans are going to do just absolutely horrible things with this incredibly powerful tool, and some humans will do great things with it. Maybe in the realm of scientific discovery or so on. But a lot of them are going to do just absolutely vile, horrible things with it. And we have a tool to deal with that, which is legislation and laws, right? I mean, child pornography is illegal, last time I checked. And so, but somehow because Grok is doing it.
Yeah.
Right. Right. But also who do you prosecute?
Yep.
Right. They can claim, well, no individual, was responsible for this. It was just our algorithm that did it, and we're going to fix it. Don't worry.
Well, then treat the algorithm as a human. Arrest it, put it in jail, and say it can't have any contact with anybody else. I mean, you know what? If corporations are people, and they want to have if they want to have nothing to do with it, they don't want any of their owners to have anything to do with it, then just kill it.
Right. Right. Yeah. No. I mean, the algorithmic piece of it is really frightening, and the de-skilling part of it. As someone who teaches, I have to say that my students generally pretty accurately detect the impact that AI is going to have on, their younger brothers and sisters, and also even on themselves, that it's a pretty irresistible technology. But what it does when you rely on that technology is that it makes people less likely to develop the skills of critical thinking and writing and expression and so on, and they're going to outsource it to this machine that they've been told is better at it than they are. So why not just let it do it? And so as it kind of drains our collective capacity to do the things that, to me, are what make us human.
Yeah.
It's really horrible to watch happen, and there just doesn't seem to be any political will or ability to put limits on it. To just say like, hey, back in the day when Tylenol had that scare with cyanide, and they removed every single bottle of Tylenol immediately. Every single bottle of Tylenol was taken off the shelves until they could figure out what was going on. And now we have, AI chatbots encouraging young people to kill themselves. We have, AI chatbots doing child pornography, and the response is, it's hard to see any other than generalized outrage on social media, but where's the meaningful self-policing or
there's states
regulation?
that have tried, but the federal government has said no, you can't. You have no. We will not let you regulate this at the state level. The outrage is being stopped by a corrupt administration that's getting money.
Right.
Speaking of outrage in the federal government, where do you think the right wing comes down on all of this Jeffrey Epstein stuff that they are so desperate to hide?
Right. Yeah, I think that's another place where a good number of people have a genuine sense of outrage, an authentic sense of outrage about it. Some of it is coming from a kind of icky place. The fact that Jeffrey Epstein is Jewish is not coincidental in terms of understanding the degree of rage that some people have about this. And it's obviously this is enraging what he did, right? And people should be outraged by what he did. But yeah, I think to me, the issue on the far right and the Epstein case is that it's like QAnon, that they see it as a metaphor and is indicative of some broader kind of conspiracy. And rather than understanding his crimes as crimes committed by discrete individuals who should be held accountable and punished for the crimes that they committed, it becomes a kind of stand-in for their generalized view of the world, which is that this is what everybody's like.
Yeah, I want to. This one's harder for me because I had the same view you do. The man's a criminal, and we need to hold everybody accountable. He went to jail, but what's come out in the last few months and the behavior of this administration leads me to believe that some of the folks on the right, maybe a clock is right twice a day, broken clock, but that it seems like a lot of powerful people have been protected that throughout this process, and they're still being protected. And I don't think that is that while that sounds like that's what they always have said on the right, it doesn't sound as crazy to me as it used to as this story unfolds.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think, in part, Marjorie Taylor Greene just came out in opposition to the attack on Venezuela. She's also been, good on the Epstein case. And so it does create
and
this
she believes in space lasers. So, it's
right. 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 Yeah. But this is where, like in a kind of normal in scare quotes kind of political environment, it's always about coalitions, right? People are always making, the entire New Deal and Great Society was made possible by a coalition between, northern racial liberals and white Southern segregationists who just liked New Deal programs that helped them economically. So, that dimension of American politics where people who have quite different visions for the country can come together around particular issues and pass legislation, maybe there's a future political arrangement whereby, and I think this has happened a little bit with like people like Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna working together on the discharge petition.
I'm confident there is. This is why I began by sort of asking you if there are fractures in the right-wing coalition and where they are.
Right. Right.
I do once a week. I do a show with a former Republican congressman who was part of the Tea Party, but he's seen the light. He's more conservative than I am about a lot of things, but he's seen the light about this democracy. And I just think there is a middle ground where people look at that. What did Freud called the id, a seething cauldron of expectations, right? That's what right-wing social media is. And we've developed psychological mechanisms to sort of, we understand what you are, but there's structures we can put over it so that we don't misbehave all the time.
Right. And I mean, this is where, like Chris Hayes' book on attention, I think is really interesting, called The Siren's Call. And to me, the way that politics and entertainment, the nature of our current media and the way people consume media is such that the boundary between entertainment and politics has just completely disappeared. And the logic of entertainment is now the logic of politics. And Trump is a perfect example of that. I mean, he's the president because he was famous. I mean, he's the president because he was on The Apprentice. That's it. Like that's a big part of it. And part of it was his message too. But he's also just famous. And so much of our what the logic driving our political conversation is the logic of attention and outrage. And the logic of attention and outrage is antithetical to the logic of compromise and people sitting together for an hour and hashing out their differences and finding out the empirical evidence upon which they're basing their arguments and then trying to arrive at some sort of agreement that is in a different place than from where they started out. That mode of what democratic self-governance looks like is a mode that is just fundamentally incompatible with how our current media environment is structured. And
I'm afraid I have to leave that as our last word, as depressing as that is. But that gives me a lot to think about at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
Look, your work is great, and if you're listening, follow Sev on Blue Sky. Sometimes he writes on something called Rightlandia, which now you can find it online. I think it's on Ghost, a platform called
Ghost. Yes.
For reasons we don't have time to talk about, but
yes.
Look, Seth is a great educator about America's right wing and its history. Really, it's exactly where I wanted to start the year. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for what you're doing too.
Yep.
I hope your more optimistic approach is the right one.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
All right, everyone, we're going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to turn to a fabulous journalist, John Nichols, when we come back.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. It was a depressing place to leave. Interesting, but depressing. I'm joined by John Nichols, who is the associate editor of Cap Times in Wisconsin, the executive editor of The Nation, author of books, a superb thinker about the power of progressive ideas in America, and has a great observer of our politics. John, welcome back.
Edwin, it's great to be with you, my friend.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Yeah. So we started fast.
Just in time for the 5th anniversary of January 6th, we decided we would go full on colonial and take over the natural resources of another country.
Well, I think there's a lot going on with Venezuela, and obviously that's shifted our thoughts about conversation today. I suspect we might have been talking a little more about midterm elections and things like that. But this is a compelling moment in our history, and it's a huge shift for Donald Trump. This is an interesting thing, as Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's becoming one of the more interesting commentators of our time, suggested in a posting this morning. This is not the way that many of Trump's supporters thought things were going to go. I was with Trump up in New Hampshire and out in Iowa in 2016 when he was a very stark critic of Jeb Bush and other people who were on stage, for wars of whim, wars of adventure, wars of economic conquest, and he really ripped into the Bushes on that, and that resonated. People heard that. Grassroots Republicans heard that. What we now call MAGA Republicans took that in as a part of their message. It's interesting, too, that I think in crossover votes that he got, we often talk about the crossover from industrial workers who weren't thrilled with deindustrialization of states like Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and did not like the trade policies that Trump and, frankly, a lot of thinking Democrats criticized. And so, that was the big focus of media coverage. But I think a sub-focus of it all was that a lot of people in the upper Midwest, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, were never fans of a lot of these wars. And so this was very beneficial to Trump in a whole bunch of ways, to be seen as something of an anti-war candidate. Now, suddenly, and fascinatingly, he is clearly, he's occupying a country. Or at least
he couldn't have been clearer, John, for the oil industry.
Yeah. For the oil industry. And saying we're going to run it. I mean, even George W. Bush didn't talk that way. He didn't say we're going to run it, or maybe he did. Maybe I missed. I'll acknowledge, that there may have been something I missed along the way. But in truth, when George W. Bush and Dick Cheney engineered a lawless assault on Iraq that ultimately, had an awful lot of blowback. They tried to couch it in terms of, kind of a quick transfer of power to people on the ground locally. Even if the truth of the matter was that the United States was effectively running things. Trump isn't doing that. He's not speaking in that more diplomatic language. He's just saying bluntly, we're going to run it. And also saying, intriguingly enough, at this morning's press conference, that boots on the ground is acceptable to him, right? That's something that he can live with.
Don't know how you run a country without it, right?
Well, I mean, theoretically you could give some advice rather than, actually put the troops there. But all of this, however you look at it, however you think about it, this is a really big shift for Donald Trump. I don't think it's going to play well for him politically because I don't think people are going to be overly, thrilled or bedazzled with the fact that they went in and grabbed Maduro and his wife and brought him up, ultimately, it sounds like, to New York for a trial. And so this is significant. I was very, very intrigued today by Marjorie Taylor Greene's response, by Thomas Massey's response. We haven't seen a lot yet, or at least going into this conversation, from Rand Paul. But there is a block of folks within the Republican Party that have been, for a long time, very uncomfortable with military adventurism. Yep. And they're speaking up, at least some of them are, Green, Massey. And what's also interesting here in this moment is that a lot of Democrats are speaking up, and they're speaking up in very thoughtful and effective ways. Tim Kaine has had some very powerful statements. He's been on this for a long time, but he's not alone out there. He's got, Mark Warner is joining him. Ruben Gallego Andy Kim. These are a lot of, I guess, what you would think of more as your mainstream Democrats, right? These, I'm not surprised that AOC and Bernie Sanders and Ro Khanna and others have spoken up, but you're really getting most of the Democratic caucus, or at least it seems like most of the Democratic caucus, speaking up on this one and expressing real concern about two things, Edwin. Yeah. First concern is about the lack of consultation with Congress. It isn't even
I want to ask you about that
approval.
separately.
Yeah. But then the second concern is about the signal that this sends to other countries around the world. We're in a very unstable moment. The global economy has been shaken up a lot, not just by Trump's tariff proposals, but also by the rise of AI. And so we're in a moment with a lot of instability. Countries are looking at other countries, China, running, drills on potentially invading Taiwan, et cetera. And suddenly the United States says, well, yeah, we didn't like this guy down in the Southern Caribbean. We thought, he was doing something that might harm us. That's much debate about, the real role of Venezuela in any kind of drug drug movement, whatever you want to call it. But the message to the rest of the world, which is something, again, a lot of the Democrats have focused on, that's very significant.
Just go take your neighbor if you want. Yeah, we're back in that world.
If you see someplace, and boy, my friend, in an era of resource wars, right, where we are looking at who's got lithium or who's got, some other, precious metal that might be particularly vital to both digital industries in general, but especially those focused on AI. Boy, what happens if the next one is that?
Yeah, and Asia's a better place to. So giving Asia to China and saying we're going to take Latin America is strategically not very smart, if that's what you're thinking is. I want to talk about this consultation piece a little more deeply because I think he consulted with the oil companies. It sure sounded like that this morning, and not with Congress. And when you think about that, and I think about the piece that you wrote to begin this year, which was focusing on Thomas Paine.
Yeah.
What kind of world is it when the oligarchs, when the king and the people around him think they should rule over everybody else and make all these decisions? Surely there's a way we can govern ourselves. And I thought about that when it occurred to me in his press conference that, oh my God, he's actually talked to the oil companies about what their role is going to be in this, and he hasn't bothered to talk to Congress. And remember, it was the oil companies, he said, give me $1 billion campaign contribution and I'll give you whatever you want, even Venezuela, I guess.
No, Venezuela's got a lot of oil. In fact, probably more than we know, because there have been complaints about the development of oil resources in the Southern Caribbean and northern South America. So, I mean, we don't even know perhaps what all they've got there, but there's a lot. And I go back to, prior to World War I, George Norris, the great independent populist, one-time Republican senator from Nebraska, said in the run-up to World War I fear we've attached the dollar sign to the flag of the United States. And I think that this has always been a historic concern, right? That we might launch military endeavors at the behest of domestic corporations or domestic industries. And Trump does seem to be suggesting that that's pretty much where we're at here. Or at least that's a part of where we're at. And those consultations with the oil companies, probably not the first time such things have happened in our history, let's be honest. But very significant. And then when you put it in the context of Congress and you say, boy, the economic interests, those who have the great wealth, the great power in this country, more concentrated in many industries, more concentrated in many ways than at any time in our history, with a huge redistribution of the wealth upwards now occurring with the AI revolution. When you see a president of the United States consulting with economic interests about military endeavors, if indeed that occurred, but not consulting with Congress, what you really see there is the removal of the American people from the process, right?
Yeah.
Because
that's why I thought about Tom Paine.
Yeah, it is. And if you go back to the history of Tom Paine, the important thing to remember there is that it was King George III's military adventurism that played a huge role in convincing Americans that they no longer wanted to be a part of the British Empire, because frankly they were looking at him drawing us into wars that frankly they didn't want to fight,
and taxing us to pay for them.
Taxing to pay for them even more so. And the prospect that some of those wars would even be on our continent as Britain or as the UK sought to expand its colonial influence. So I think you were very wise to make that connection faster than me.
No, you wrote about it for just to begin the year.
I wrote about
you
pain,
knew it was important.
But you're making the connection to actually the developments today. Bottom line is that I think we are talking about important historical and contemporary intersections here. And boy, if we go into the 250th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence as effectively an empire or an imperialistic/colonialistic nation, that really is an abandonment of awful lot of what, not just at the founding, but in the first 150 years of the United States, there was a great consciousness on the part of many, many political figures that we did not want to, as John Quincy Adams said, go abroad searching for monsters to destroy. It was this concept that we were going to be a different kind of country. And today, at least, we weren't looking all that different from the United Kingdom back in 1776.
No, absolutely not. All right, let's change the subject a little bit, but I mean, the consequences for our midterms of all of these things are on your mind and mine. The right wing and some Democrats are absolutely panicked by Zoran Mamdani. And here's what I don't understand, because I just don't see it. Why is saying, I am not going to apologize for fighting for every American who lives in this city, why is that so repulsive to so many people? I mean, I don't think it can all be down to Islamophobia, but maybe, I don't know.
No, it's much more than that. Look, I mean, I've interviewed Mamdani a lot of times. I find him a very, very interesting man. He thinks a lot about what he says and why he says it and the approaches that he takes. His message from the start has been that he is obviously an immigrant. He is a Muslim. He is a democratic socialist. He is a very young man. And, all of this was a part of the persona that New Yorkers were attracted to, right? Or that they heard elements of and at least interested in. But the core of it all, the message that he never let go of, and frankly that he never lets go of, even in conversations now, post-election, is that his goal is to shift the balance of our politics away from a handful of billionaires who, with the AI revolution and other developments, want to become trillionaires, toward the great mass of people. And I was at his swearing in the other day, and one of the things I noted in his speech was he said, I was elected as a democratic socialist, I will govern as a democratic socialist.
I heard that.
Spoke of having a very ambitious tenure that would, seek to go way beyond kind of traditional politics. Instead of lowering expectations, raising expectations, saying, ask for more of me, encourage me to do more, tell me that I shouldn't back off my promises, but in fact lean into them. That was his own message in the speech. And then one very powerful part of it, and he said, look, I know that there are people who didn't vote for me. I want to tell you, I'm going to be your mayor as well. Yep. And he wasn't saying that to the rich, right? He was saying that to more conservative working class folks. And this is where I think he becomes very threatening in the eyes of the elites, right? Because if you have a democratic socialist mayor who is saying, look, I am really going to focus on affordability, and I'm going to do that not just in the interest of people who voted for me, but people who didn't vote for me. I really want to deliver a more affordable, functional, supportive city. If he succeeds, boy, that shifts the balance. Well, but it shifts the balance in a way that Franklin Roosevelt did. Remember?
I mean,
that's what Roosevelt did.
You can say that if you don't believe in it's a zero-sum game. If you believe that we can grow, then you know what? Then it's a matter of let the people who are doing the work share in the prosperity, of growth. He's not saying I'm going to take from one crowd and give to, take from you conservatives to give to you progressives. He's saying all of us who are working hard have something in common. And the fight that I started to feel coming last year, and I feel it, that we learned how to do it last year and we need it, it's organized people versus organized money.
Yeah. Well, and that's, again, you're virtually quoting Roosevelt, right? In his great 1936 speech, and several of his speeches in the mid-1930s, which is that he actually suggested that organized money, organized wealth, was as threatening as organized crime, which was a very blunt statement in that era. And yet what he was trying to say is that when money gets together and tries to tell you what you can or cannot do as a city, a state, a country, then you essentially see the end of democracy, right? That is not a democracy where a handful of wealthy and powerful people define what government can and cannot do, because obviously we see that again and again. If government isn't on the side of the working class, if it isn't on the side of the great mass of people, they're going to suffer, right? They're going to work hard, play by the rules, but not get any kind of real advancement in the quality of their life.
No.
I
of
think
course,
that
corporations are people now. So
there you go.
Yeah. John, I don't want to leave our time without spending a moment on this terrible anniversary that's coming. And Jack Smith's testimony came out, and Mike Pence has a book now out with more evidence of the attempt to destroy the democracy on January 6th. I'd sort of like your thoughts on that anniversary. And if we take back our government, how important is accountability going to be? And we failed to get it last time.
Yeah. Look, one of the things is, I saw these events play out from Madison, Wisconsin, out in the middle of the country on a cold winter day.
Yep.
And at that point, I felt like this country was still what we have, what we have hoped and believed it would be, a place where you have the rule of law. And I think that rather than focusing on the anniversary itself, I think the more important thing is to focus on a kind of a trajectory we have been on. And some of it comes before, right? Let's be very clear. This one day that, was chaotic and horrible in a lot of ways. But before that, we saw a diminution of the rule of law. Remember, Trump was impeached twice. He was impeached, in 2020 and again in 2021. And in each case, those efforts at accountability failed. Those are not the only efforts at accountability that have failed in recent decades. We have been in a period now for quite a while where our constitutional premises for how we do things have frayed, right?
Yep.
And I remember thinking, 5 years ago or something like that perhaps we'd get back to a point where there'd be at least some bipartisan commitment to maintaining accountability. I don't think that, obviously it didn't happen ultimately, and I don't think that we're pretty much anywhere near it even now. And this is a little call out on the Democrats, right? I'm not sure Democrats are always as serious as on accountability as they should be, because we're talking now about war and peace issues, and there have been plenty of times where Democrats have kind of taken advantage of space that allows them to launch a military attack without the permission of Congress.
Well, and John,
this is where
2008, we did not hold a single banker accountable for destroying the American economy. That was on Democrats and an entire generation of rage.
On Republicans. And on Republicans.
But we didn't do it when Barack was president afterwards. We just didn't do it. And I think that's part of the rage that led to Trump was that failure to hold people accountable.
See, and this is what I want to. I know we only have a minute or so, but I think this is the important thing, because all of this adds up, right? A lack of accountability on war and peace, on presidential abuses, on economic wrongdoing. when you add it all together, you end up in a situation where you have impunity, right, on the part of the especially the wealthy and the powerful.
Yep.
And I think that gets us to a point like where we're at today, right? Because we have the President of the United States saying, oh, yeah, we just went in and launched an attack. He did not consult with Congress, certainly didn't get approval of Congress. And when he was asked in the press conference about this, he rather jokingly says, well, you can't really – sometimes members of Congress leak. You can't really trust them, stuff like this. Well, I mean, Edwin, you're old enough to know what a distance that is from how even the worst presidents used to talk about this stuff. Because even the worst presidents would say, well, I called the Speaker of the House, or I called the President of the Senate, or you know what I mean, consulted with the Gang of Eight or whatever.
No president I can remember ever thought he was a king. Now that our 200th birthday, we're just going to have to refight the same fight. 250th, sorry. We're going to have to refight that same fight.
Well, I think we do have some tools. The First Amendment of the Constitution gives us the right to assemble, petition for the redress of grievances, to speak, right to worship as we choose. We have to defend that very strongly because we're going to need that. We also have the ballot. And the ballot, which was very diminished at the time of our founding, is now, for all of the assaults, all the gerrymandering, everything, we have seen a 250-year process of expansion of the franchise, opening it up, letting more people come into the process. Often those people had to fight, and suffer and struggle for that right to vote. But we have a relatively expansive electorate in this country. And we have an election coming up. And this is a real challenge on how we focus our discussion about the election. Accountability has to be a part of it. But again, I'll come back to Mamdani. Mamdani understood something about how to talk to people. And when he said, yeah, you need accountability, yeah, you need to focus on these democracy issues, he always made that last connection, which is to say that only by doing that can we get enough control over the economy so that your lives can be made better, right? And
it's a great message.
If Democrats are smart, they have to link it. They have to link concerns about accountability, concerns about democracy, and concerns about economic decline, unfairness, cruelty. Because if you don't, then somebody else will say, well, democracy doesn't work. Put me in charge. I'll make your life better.
Yeah. Boy, I love our conversation.
Democrats, right? Small D Democrats have to make that connection and to say, we need a strong democracy, strong enough so that the working class
so the government works
can
for
elect
us.
people to serve them.
Yeah. Well, John, thank you as always. I really appreciate it. I know we've been having these conversations now for a couple of years, and they continue to be
enjoy them.
Really interesting. Really interesting. I know you like to walk, and I know you like to walk even in the cold. So I wish you well out there. Here in the Midwest, it's cold, and
it is cold, and there's snow on the ground, and this is why I am a deeply rooted Midwesterner.
Me too.
I enjoy these. I enjoy these days, but I also enjoy deep conversations like we have on this show. And so I really appreciate you, Edwin. Keep strong and keep doing what you do.
Soon. Yep. Thanks, John.
I look forward to it, my friend.
Yep.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, we're going to take a break, but isn't that fabulous? Another journalist coming up in a minute, Mark Jacob. He's no stranger to folks on this channel, but we have an interesting conversation coming. Don't go away.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. I got a treat for you. Special repeat performance on this station by Mark Jacob, who you guys all know. He's a regular on Jones' show. He's been the editor at the Sun-Times and at the Tribune here in Chicago. He's the author of books. I really liked his book on Abe Saperstein and the Harlem Globetrotters. It's a fun and really interesting read. He's also pissed off at his former profession in journalism for going AWOL in our moment of need, something he writes about in a fabulous must-read newsletter called Stop the Presses. Mark, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Edwin.
I had a whole bunch of things that I was like teed up and wanted to talk to you about, and then last night happened.
Yeah.
And I'd like just to get your quick take on, I mean, I have one, but I'd love to hear yours on, well, actually, let me start with this. I wish a reporter would have asked Marco Rubio if he'd consulted with the oil companies about Venezuela's future while he was not talking to Congress about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, actually, according to members of the Senate, they just flat out lied to him about regime change, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you know what, Edwin? I mean, it's really clear that this White House is a criminal enterprise. And, I hate to say that, but it's obviously true. You see it in a number of ways. You see, Trump getting bribed by foreigners, on this cryptocurrency stuff. You see it all the time. And so if you watch the press conference today, Trump, he had kind of dropped the whole, well, it's drugs is the reason I'm down here kind of thing. And he just started talking about oil. He was just talking about, well, we're going to make so much money off the oil that we can take care of Venezuela. And we know who's going to get taken care of with the oil. I mean, this is just smash and grab kind of banditry.
Yes, and colonialism doesn't always work out the way the colonizers think. And this is really what that is. Go into another nation and with your military, protect and find ways to export the natural wealth out for the benefit of the colonizing country. It's never very good for the country that gets colonized, but it turns out that there's generally opposition to it on the ground. I don't know how he thinks, we're going to run it. Seriously? We're going to run this country that doesn't want our army there from the Oval Office or from Mar-a-Lago. I think he's insane.
It's super unclear what exactly they have in mind. He's acting like, well, we'll just make it up as we go. I mean, it's pretty insane what they're talking about. The way, he's talking about, well, we're going to run the country, and that's their terminology. We're going to run the country, which certainly doesn't sound like, like we're indicting somebody for drug trafficking and we're going to handle them in U.S. courts. It's regime change. And then at the press conference, Trump talked about, well, the interim president, the vice president who took over, we had a nice talk with her, and she's going to, help us run the country. Just a few minutes ago, she went on television and denounced them and re-upped her support for Maduro. So what's going on here?
I don't know.
And according to the reports from Caracas, there are no Americans there. They came in, they grabbed the Maduro and his wife, and they left. So how do you occupy a country without being in the country?
Yeah, no, it's crazy what he said. And I thought it was really interesting. Again, in that press conference, there was sort of one moment of truth. And that was when Dan Kane, the chair of the Joint Chiefs, was speaking. And, he repeated the praise of the military, repeated the praise of dear leader as required. But he also said, we were there because we had a mission, and our mission was aimed at supporting and protecting American law enforcement who were out there to bring in the indicted Maduro.
Right.
So, that's not the same thing as regime change. That's not the same thing as occupying and taking the oil. He said the military mission was narrow and tailored. And of course, we have the greatest military, blah, 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 which all is true, by the way. We have a very powerful military. What good do you use it for in the world is an interesting question.
Yeah.
But so Dan Kane was clear about what the military mission is. And then President Trump said, yeah, we're taking the oil.
Right.
And Cuba, you might be next.
Right. Right. I mean, and on radio earlier today, I'm not radio, on Fox News, Trump was talking about Mexico. He was talking about, well, if they're not going to do anything, we're going to have to do something about Mexico. I mean, what the heck is going on here? It just seems like he's acting like a dictator who just wants to gobble up other countries and other territories. Who does
that give permission to, by the way?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. If I were in Taiwan, I'd be shaking in my boots. Can you imagine?
Oh, yeah.
Think about that. I mean,
or Kiev.
And who's going to, is the United States going to denounce China if they take over Taiwan? They have no moral. We have no moral standing to do that now. And well, I mean, and what about Putin? I mean, does are us denouncing him for trying to, grab his neighbors is, just rings hollow. And also, see, Edwin, another thing is, I just wish, as someone who looks at the news media a lot, I think a little explanatory journalism is necessary. I feel like these networks and newspapers need to explain how constitutional democracy works and how this was supposed to play out if we were a constitutional democracy, because this ain't it. I mean, this is not how you're supposed to do things. And the argument that well, we didn't have to consult Congress because it was a secret law enforcement mission is BS for all the reasons you just stated. There's a way wider mission than just arresting and prosecuting somebody for drug trafficking.
Yeah, yes. I don't understand the role of the media anymore, really. When I was an alderman, I was young, and one of the older aldermen came to me and he said, "I love you young guys who think this is legit." Because I was like, fighting for something, and I kind of have that feeling about our understanding of the media these days. I had a guest on earlier who said, "I think you don't understand the toxic stew of social media that is how people consume how people get their knowledge of the world we live in today." And it's defined by people who have figured out that if they are outrageous, they get higher ratings and they can make money. And that is how people are learning what's true and what's not in the world. And journalism, I mean, he said, even if you think Blue Sky is a good example, there are 1 million people on it, and that's hardly the whole country. Like, I mean, you and I spend a lot of time with great journalists, even if they work for organizations that piss us off sometimes. There's great journalism at the New York Times. Sometimes there's even great journalism sometimes in the Washington Post, although God help us, that editorial this morning. Right. But like 11 people see it. Not 11, but the people who see it already know what's going on.
Well, yeah, I mean, with the big mistake I think that the progressive media has made for the last few decades is relying on legacy, old-fashioned media. While you were getting the Joe Rogans and various other folks on podcasts and YouTube shows and you name it, and we were broadening their reach, and they were reaching people who were not news nerds. I mean, that's the whole thing. My Stop the Presses is done through Courier, which is a news chain that's in several states and does kind of goes at underreached people. It posts on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, places where it reaches people who don't really want to be reached in a way. They're not saying, well, they don't wake up like you and me and say, well,
they're not paying for the news.
Yeah, I don't really want to, I really want to know what's happening in Congress. They don't wake up and think that, but they need to understand things. And so I feel like progressive media has made a big mistake over recent decades by not reaching out to the underreached people and not telling them why it's relevant to them, why it's important to them. Yeah. And that's why you get this situation you have now where lies really get traction, and Trump, Trump was lied his butt off at that press conference today, and he didn't get corrected. This whole thing. Well, haven't been any murders in Washington D.C. since we brought the National Guard in.
Right. Or he sent his troops to Chicago in order to help us. Oh my God,
that's why crime is down, even though they never deployed in Chicago because of the lawsuit by the state. So he's like claiming credit for doing something that the National Guard troops weren't even in Chicago to do. So it's just a lie. I know the D.C. thing. Well, since we went in, there haven't been any murders in D.C. except for that attack on the National Guard. And so I just went to my phone and Googled, and I swear in 5 to 10 seconds, I found a murder that happened in Washington, D.C. in early December. So what's he talking about? It's just these lies don't get corrected. I haven't seen any other than me posting about it, I haven't seen any news media outlet correcting all the other lies that Trump told during that news conference. And so he gets away with it, and it gets implanted in the public mind. And there's just,
I don't know, Mark. I don't know if he gets away with it. I think the entire country knows the man lies as he breathes. I mean, some people want to support him, and they don't care if he lies. In fact, they give him credit for being a liar.
For us, kind of thing.
Right. But I don't think there's a person in America who thinks this man knows true from foul. No. I mean, right. I'm not saying, I mean, the thing he did with the hurricanes going left, it's going right, or just right. There's just, everybody knows he's a liar. And so it's hard to know what is the most important thing to cover, because well, it's not just that he's a liar. He's also a thief. I mean, he's also, there are all these things that he are. So maybe, and I wanted to ask you this, every day there's a new outrage, and we could focus on those outrages. But then the problem is the news consumer, it's new, and they don't really understand. It's just the 800th episode of something that's the same. Right. So I'm wondering if we should start to report on categories of crime from the Trump administration, as opposed to any new one, because it's not a one-off. So election subversion, right? Trump he wants to subvert our elections. Right. And so when we report on this week, he vetoes a water bill for Colorado. Mm-hmm. That's a true story. But really, it's just one more piece of evidence that he's serious about tampering with elections. Right. That he's like trying to get a criminal who messed with election systems out of jail. Out of jail. And he can't pardon her because it's a state crime. I'm glad you asked this question, because one of the things I've really been pushing for is that the news media need to write these really sweeping stories about categories, as you say. Yep. You need to, instead of like this drip, drip, drip every day that people can't, they don't understand how it fits into everything else and all that. They need to write really sweeping stories, like with headlines like Trump assaults U.S. election system. And I mean, they won't, because they're afraid to. To me, it's either, complicity or, cluelessness or whatever. It's or cowardice. Those are the 3 C's. And that's the reason that they won't do it. But what they do, they need to write these really sweeping stories saying, Trump is building a dictatorship, and then give you 10 reasons why. Here's how. And here's how he's doing it. But then they need to, in the news business, we used to call it hitting the total button, where instead of writing, here's a good example in Chicago with all this police misconduct we had when I was at the, when I was at the Chicago Tribune. And instead of every time the city of Chicago made a settlement with somebody who they had, shot in misconduct, instead of writing a story about each one of those, we wrote those stories, but we also tried to hit the total button and do a story about, well, the city of Chicago has paid X amount of money over the last year or 2 or 3. And those stories have more impact. I agree. I taught a course this year at a college about challenges in American democracy and what's going on. And we took the framework. There are lots of frameworks for measuring healthy democracies. One of them is from the Economist Intelligence Unit. It's used by the UN, so I use it. And it's got like 5 categories of things that they measure to determine, whether you have a healthy democracy or something else. And so we would just every week take the news stories, and the students would put them in the category they belong in. To show, what's their impact on our democracy, so that they added up to something, so they weren't one-off stories, so that the whole picture became clearer. Right. Well, putting it in a frame instead of letting it just kind of sit there as just one isolated story that that you can't really fully explain. That's super important. But again, the news media, by and large, the major news media, are afraid to do that, because it comes across, if you write a story that says Trump is building a dictatorship, which is I've been for months urging the news media to do, because you could totally support it. Obviously, there's so many data points on that, but they won't write that because they think that would come across as partisan or it's unfair.
And it's the whole idea is that, that telling the truth is unfair. It's unfair to Trump if you actually tell the truth about what he's doing. I just feel like, and I've stopped saying that in social media that Trump's a would-be dictator. I just call him a dictator now because if you see what he's doing,
Oh, I
he's
think
operating like a dictator. He's getting away with being a dictator almost always. Not recently with the ruling in Chicago as far as the National Guard, but
Yeah.
he's going to come back to that. He's threatened to come back to that
We'll come back to it.
and use the Insurrection Act. In fact, that's kind of the reason that he lost that ruling in the Supreme Court is that is there the argument that you had to use military forces, main military forces first to put down this supposed uprising that's not happening in Chicago. But by and large, he's right now winning. I mean, he's got very low approval rating. He's, 36% ain't great. But he has the military, and he wants to use them, Edwin, he wants us to get used to him using the military.
Yeah,
that's the thing that I think is that you can see as a real strategy of not necessarily Trump, but all of his advisors, because I'm not sure how much Trump is kind of just a guy who just goes by impulse, and he's he's really kind of a mob boss criminal type, but he's not a grand strategist. But there are people, the Project 2025 people are grand strategists. And I think that they want to get us used to troops in the street. They want to get us used to using troops to strong arm and intimidate foreign countries. They want us to get used to the U.S. as the biggest bully on the block.
I have a slightly different take. I agree with you that he is the most powerful president we have ever had. And he got that way because supine Congress and sympathetic court let him take these powers and lethal powers and use them in ways that can't.
Right.
But I don't know that he's winning. He's gotten more and more powerful. But in the time that he's gotten powerful, we also learned how to fight back. Last year was an interesting year for us.
Right.
It's an old muscle, the one that we used in 1776, but we're learning it again. And he wants us used to troops in the street, but we aren't used to troops in the street.
Right.
And the media here in Chicago, the folks you used to work with, the Sun-Times and the Tribune and Block Club, they did a superb job. Reporting on the DHS occupation here, and the public, instead of getting used to it, fought back and inspired the public, in New Orleans and in Charlotte and in Minneapolis to do similar things. So I don't know that he's winning. I mean, he is really powerful, but it turns out we're getting pretty powerful too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to come across as negative because I totally agree with you. I think what happened with Homeland Security in Chicago should give us a lot of hope.
Because, it's Waterloo.
Yeah, because yes, coming from the media, and when I was at the Trib and, I saw the diminished resources there,
Yes.
With losing 85% of your staff over 15 years, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I really had questioned whether the Chicago press would be able to handle a story of that magnitude. And they did. They diverted the resources, from less important things to more important things. They covered it really aggressively and really smartly.
Yep.
Really proud of that. And also, in just the people of Chicago, because, as you know, sometimes Chicago can come across as three different cities. It can come across as a white city, a black city, and a Latino city. And there's 2-3 separate cities. And when Homeland Security came in and started smashing out people's windows, zip tying children, and shooting people,
those lines disappeared.
Yeah, the city came together, and you saw people defending their neighbors, and it didn't matter about the ethnicity.
Yep.
And that's really encouraging. I mean, that's really inspirational. I'm proud of Chicago for that. And so I don't think that I think that we need more activism like that. That's what I'm preaching, is that we need more people to, get off of their couch and get out there. There's a protest today at Federal Plaza at 5 p.m. about this Venezuela thing, and people can come out there. and I'm going to be out there. And I just feel like that people need to get active, because if they don't, they'll regret it. Because the Trump people are counting on us to just to pretend this crap is normal and to accept it, and we can't do that.
And I don't think we are. I mean, look, his regime, they attacked American journalists. They attacked Americans and journalists who were either covering or protesting what they did here in Chicago. And then DOJ, terribly named because there's no justice there anymore.
Right.
They're an enforcement arm of the guy in charge. Claims that taking pictures of ICE troops is somehow an act of terrorism.
Right.
Right? Like they want to prosecute you for terrorism if you take a picture of police on your street. Right? They aren't going to get away with it, but they're going to try and scare people. And yet, oh my God, we got great pictures of them on our streets. They threatened us, and we didn't back down. I mean, and I guess now they're threatening to bomb Iran again if the mullahs do to their opposition what Trump is trying to do to his.
I know, and the thing was so ironic about that, him saying, well, if you guys do that, we're going to use our military against you. Trump, it was only like 2.5 months ago that Trump posted a video, after No King's Day of him, a cartoon version of him flying an airplane and dropping excrement on protesters. Right. So it's not like Trump has some sort of great love of protesters and wants to guard their rights. I mean, it's just so hypocritical in every way, and people need to be. One of the things I say, Edwin, is I feel like people need to hold on to their outrage, because they want to normalize this. They want to keep on doing such awful things all the time. They want to knock down part of the White House without asking anyone's permission, and lying about that too, because they lied and said they wouldn't do that when they built the ballroom. Everything's a lie, and everything is just this kind of secret, sneaky way for the king to get more power. And we can't. We have to be outraged by that. We cannot. We just, as Americans, we need to not accept it, and not accept it as normal. It's just not normal. And damn it, it's not. We're not going to make it normal by just allowing it to happen.
We will not. And
we get pissed off.
It's easier for him to break stuff, which he's good at, than to build anything, which he's except a building. I don't think he can build anything. And it turns out, like because of the laws, he isn't going to be able to do anything with that hole in the ground he now lives next to, because it's going to sit there as a reminder of this. He's not going to get his ballroom built. There's going to turn out that there's a process, and he isn't going to go through it.
Right. Well, I hope that's true.
Yeah. I mean, so we're I think we are in a terrible fight with a very powerful adversary, and unfortunately, in this what's left of our democracy, that adversary sits in the White House and has been given unprecedented control of the federal apparatus. But we have elections coming, Mark, and we did pretty well the last couple times we had elections.
Right. I mean, the only thing there is you have him. Gerrymandering to try to get extra seats, and you have him trying to assault mail-in voting, and stuff like that. So, I mean, he's a criminal. So what is he going to do? He's going to try to rig elections.
He is.
But clearly,
he tried before.
Yeah, right, exactly. He tried to overthrow an election already.
Yeah, I mean, it's the anniversary is coming up.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think you're right, though, that if it's anywhere close to a fair election, we will we'll gain back the House. When I say we, I don't even mean Democrats, because I consider myself an independent. But what I mean is pro-democracy forces. I mean, because the entire Republican Party is almost, except for just a couple members, is for Trump and shares
culpability.
Yeah, they totally share it. Yeah. And there was even the thing but back on the Venezuela thing. So Trump is he says clearly that he's going to run Venezuela, After that, Fox News does an interview with Darrell Issa, who says, "Well, I don't think we're going to do we're not going to do nation buildings. We're not, we're not going to run the country. We're going to let them run the country." I mean, what are you talking about? Your dear leader said 2 hours ago that he was going to run the country, and so you're saying he's not. And there was, that one of the representatives, Republicans from Iowa, said the same thing. Said, "Well, nobody's in favor of nation building."
Good for
That's
them.
what he talked about. He just said he was going to do it.
And I don't think he's going to get to. So we will have just spent, I don't know how expensive that, but it was air, sea, land,
Right.
months of training, months of
Right.
standing there in readiness, weeks of standing in readiness, waiting for the right weather, probably, close to $400 billion or more on this exercise in order to bring one guy into court while he's pardoning another guy for the exact same crimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Which says to me, it's like we're beginning this year and the man is terrified. As powerfully as he is dangerous and desperate. And, there's still Jeffrey Epstein hanging over his head.
Totally.
And he just is desperate. And that's why he did this. And it showed in that crazy press conference, and it doesn't matter even that he gets CBS News and takes it off the table and makes it Fox Light, which it now is trying its best to be. It doesn't matter because Americans, you just can't hide who the president is.
Right.
And the reality of our lives is that they've gotten worse with this guy. Our public health is worse. Our finances are worse. Our self-respect is worse. The world no longer looks at us. He says, we're back. What he really is saying is, I can kill you. Right. And that is all that matters. Right. And that is not the ethic that Americans hold as greatness.
No, and we're the hottest country around. We were dead a year ago. No, exactly, not really. But you're right that you can keep on saying crap like that, but people know the reality of this. They know that their grocery prices. They know stuff like that.
Yeah. So it took a while. So the longer he says this, Mark, the more he seems to be at odds with the.
Right.
For a while he was really good at being one of the people. Right, that all of this, I'm not for political correctness. I talk like you guys talk. I'm just like your uncle. I'm one of you, right? But then he threw in his lot with the billionaires. He tore down the White House. He taxed everybody with his tariffs, except the rich guys. So we ended up paying for Jeff Bezos' wedding in Venice, and Americans are like, wait a minute, what do you mean affordability is a hoax? And what do you mean you're spending all this money on? I apologize.
How is that America first? It's. And the Epstein stuff really actually does give you hope that things will catch up with him. Because I thought, well, that's, by the boards, that's gone down the river. Nobody cares about, I always cared about it. But it came back and bit him, and it's still biting him. And so that does give you some hope that ultimately, he will. He's dodged accountability for a long time, but it'll eventually, I hope it'll come to him.
Yeah, we have to be as determined as he is desperate. And if it takes the kind of outrage that you think we should have in order to stay determined, I'm all for it.
Yeah, me too.
Mark, thank you for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me. It was fun to talk.
Yeah, take care.
You too.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a break for the news, and we're going to talk economics with Dean Baker when we come back.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid, on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. I am joined and happy in the first show of the new year to be joined by Dean Baker. He's, of course, a senior economist at the Center for Economic and Policy Research, which he started, and he has been a big part of this show for years, helping us understand what's going on in the economy. Hi, Dean. Happy New Year.
Hey, yeah, Happy New Year to you too, Edwin. How you doing?
Good. So I assume if I were betting on, equity futures, that military contractors and oil companies are doing pretty well today.
The military contractors, yes. Oil companies, I wouldn't know about that. That's actually a tough call because oil prices are pretty low. I'm not sure how quickly you could see oil coming out of Venezuela. I mean, there's obviously
And
already
it'll only
been
lower
some
the
flow.
price, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't know the oil companies are happy about that. They're already cutting back production in Texas and other places. So I don't know that the oil companies will necessarily be that happy. I'm sure some will come out well. I mean, the ones that have made the right contributions have been visiting Mar-a-Lago, But I don't know if the industry as a whole is going to be happy about this.
That's so interesting. So when Trump says we're going there for the oil, he may not be right. That's interesting.
Well, I'm sure he could have some buddies that will make money on this, but the industry itself, again, I don't want to try and get in Trump's head. It's a dangerous place, but oil's pretty low price right now, and a lot of companies aren't making a profit at the current price. So I don't know. They want it lower in terms of the benefits to the U.S. economy. I mean, obviously it's horrible from the standpoint of global warming. Why would we want low oil prices? Encourage people to burn more of the stuff. But it's not clear that it helps. Well, I shouldn't say it's not clear. It hurts the oil industry and the help to the U.S. economy. Suppose you drop the price of oil $5 a barrel, which would actually be a lot, $5 a barrel. That knocks off about 10 cents a gallon. People would be happy for that, but it's not a sea change. We had a bad story, obviously, during just after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and people were paying over $5 a gallon, which was a big hit. But we were down around $3 a gallon. Democrats aren't very good. Biden, particularly, wasn't very good at making a sales pitch. But gas had been down around $3 a gallon at the end of his administration, November of last year. So it's $2.85 now. I'd have to check what the latest number. That's less than $3. But I don't know anyone's really going out and celebrating. It's $2.85. And if we got down to $2.80 again, that's a little extra money in your pocket. But really, 50 cents a week for a typical person? I mean, that's not really going to make your day.
But for the oil companies, it's going to put out of business the clean tech companies. So it's a long-term play for them.
Well, there too, I don't know. It hurts. Obviously, the lower oil prices go, the less demand there is for clean energy. The prices have come down so much for clean energy, for EVs, and we aren't seeing a lot of that here because they cut back the subsidies that Biden put in place. So prices of EVs have gone up, at least from the standpoint if we're looking to buy one. But they are coming down worldwide, and again, Trump is preventing us from seeing those by putting really high tariffs. Biden, in fairness, began those, but Trump's putting up other barriers. So that's a problem for us here. But in a worldwide framework, China's 60% of their cars that they sell are now EVs, and because they export them and they're very cheap, when they export them, that's true of a lot of other, I shouldn't say a lot, but in other developing countries. I know in Nepal, I saw some figures around 70% of their new cars are EVs. That's because they're getting cheap cars exported from China. So we're seeing enormous progress on developing clean technologies, batteries, energy storage, and electric vehicles. Unfortunately, we're not taking a big part of that. I mean, there are companies here doing it, but the Chinese are the leaders, and Trump obviously is not being supportive.
What do you expect will happen to the economy if the Supreme Court sometime this month says, yeah, you know what, he didn't really have the power to impose those tariffs?
Well, a lot will be up in the air because there are two big things, and I think they will rule that. I mean, that's what, people read the court better than I do. I mean, people who study it think they're likely to rule that at least limit Trump's tariff authority. So, but there are two big questions. One is, do they order refunds? That will be a lot of money put back into the economy if they do, somewhere in the order of 150. I'd have to check where we stand now, 150 billion, something like that, which is a chunk of change. That's roughly $1,000, a little more than $1,000 per household. Now, they're not going to be sending checks to us. They're going to be sending checks to the companies that paid the tariff when they imported the stuff. So how much of that trickles down as opposed to just being paid out to shareholders, that I don't know. But but that would put a lot of money into the economy. But the other question is how broadly they rule, because essentially what Trump did was, and he's done this on a lot of things, there's authority granted by Congress to impose tariffs. It's very limited. Trump goes, I call national security. I can do whatever the hell I want. Well, they'd be saying, no, you can't do whatever the hell you want. There's other tariff authorities that he could look to. Now, the question will be, and he's already said he will, but the question is, are they going to issue a ruling that makes it very clear that they're all intended to be narrow? Nothing Congress passed was intended to say, Trump, the president, can put whatever tariffs he wants on any country they want, anytime they want. They're very specific circumstances. So the question is whether they'll make a ruling that's very strong and says, no, these are very specific tariff authorities. He has to follow the law. He can't just go and say, they're dumping, and they have to. So dumping is something that has to be determined. It's not Donald Trump says they're dumping. It has to be determined by people who've studied the data. And so anyhow, all the tariff authorities have rules like that say you have to make determinations. It's not just whatever the president says. So the question will be whether they make a strong ruling like that clearly curtails his authority. And then if he were to then go out and go, okay, I'm just going to put my tariffs under this other authority, then in principle, at least, you'd have lower courts staying it and saying you can't impose the tariffs, and the court would uphold the stay and say that, we'll look at that in due course, but in the meantime, your tariff can't go back on. And if that's the case, that'd be good for the economy.
I mean, but so all that money would come back to the companies that paid the tariffs or the finance companies that bought the potential refunds on pennies on the dollar, right, as an investment.
Yeah.
But it also blows however big that is, it blows that big a hole in the budget, an already enormously out of balance budget. And I know that has never been your issue, but at some point it's got to at least merit attention. No.
Yeah, well, it definitely makes the deficit larger, and that again, I'm not terribly worried about the 226 deficit. I'd like to see it a little smaller, but I'm not terribly worried about that. But again, a lot of this, and I get angry with economists because they go, if we continue this for a decade, well, we could continue it for a decade, but nothing we do this year is going to determine what the budget deficit is going to be in 231, 232, 233. I mean, we have a lot of elections. We'll have different people in office. Maybe they'll make choices that make the deficit larger, which they might, and then somewhere down the road we have a problem. But we aren't locking in a large deficit for 235 with anything we do today. So I think people can get carried away with that. So again, to my view, if I could snap my fingers, if we tax the rich more, collect the taxes that corporations actually owe, and we have a smaller deficit, and I think that'd be a great thing. But I'm not terrified that the deficit's so large we're about to, and no one's going to hold down. I will say what's more scary, though, if the classic story of the deficit, people are going to be fearful, financial markets will panic. That's much more a story, in my view, when you see a government acting erratically, as it is under Trump, where he puts tariffs on whoever he doesn't like. He stops projects like what he did with wind energy because, nutty things, you're killing birds. I mean, this is just nutball stuff. So where you have a government that just, because the president gets angry at the wind, in this case, literally, he's going to stop projects that companies have invested literally billions in. You can't, that's a recipe for economic disaster.
And we have the impact of expired health care cuts. That's going to hurt too, no?
Yeah, it's a huge whack to people. It's, you wonder, I don't know much you follow social media, probably best not to be on Twitter or whatever, but you see all these Republican politicians saying, we're just going to give the money to the people. They know better what to do with it. And you're just going, have you missed the healthcare debate of the last, quarter century, really? It's not a new debate. There are real problems in the healthcare market for obvious reasons that, insurers, if you're healthy, sure, they're happy to take your money because most people are reasonably healthy, and the insurers say, sure, we'll give you good insurance and, we won't charge you a real high price. But then if you have a health condition, if you actually need your insurance, if you have a heart condition, if you've had a history of cancer, diabetes, all these things, they don't want to see you. And that's what Obamacare was about, and it was fantastic that way. A lot of criticisms, I have criticized, and will continue. I'd love to see Medicare for all. But what it did was it made it possible for people who have health conditions to get at least reasonably affordable insurance. And the enhanced subsidies were part of that story because it's still, even though it extended coverage hugely, even prior to these enhanced subsidies, then extended much further and made it much more affordable to people who might have already had insurance but were really struggling. And now they'll go back to really struggling.
I just, the picture is so confusing to me. The markets have not tanked. How much of that is an AI bubble?
Look, to my view, it's all a bubble. It's the economy is really being driven by AI in two ways now. One, a very large share of the direct investment, what's being spent on equipment, on building power plants, that's AI. I mean, we wouldn't be building power plants all over the place if it weren't for AI. I mean, the demand for power absent AI, I don't even know if it's growing. I mean, if it is, it'd be very small. But you're seeing huge increase in demand from AI, from the need for data centers. And the other part of the story is it feeds on itself because the market's gone up so much over the last 3-4 years. You have all these people who have more money and they're spending based on that. And this is exactly what we saw with the tech bubble in the late 90s, that we had this huge wealth effect. People had money in the stock market and they could spend on it, or they weren't putting money in their 401ks because why would you? The market did it for you, went up 20% some of those years. So it's really driving the economy. And again, I shouldn't say I worry. I really hope it collapses as soon as possible because it's a bad story. I mean, I understand people will be hurt. They thought they had 100,000 in their 401k. They're going to find out they have 70. Or again, I have no idea how big a fall you might have or how fast. But in any case, you'll see a lot of people that have less money in their savings than they thought. But on the other hand, this is not a healthy path of growth. If you have all this money, all these resources being going into AI, and it ends up not paying off, which, again, I could be wrong, but I just don't see how it's going to pay off. I'll just say, for whatever it's worth, I'm not the only one saying this. A lot of people are saying this, and many of them know much more about AI than I do. And that ends up being a huge waste, and, of course, being a huge cost to the environment, because the last thing on earth we should be doing is building power plants that we don't need.
I mean, I remember the 1990s. My first job out of government was in a startup that was a victim of the crash. And it was painful, really painful for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's not a good story. I mean, again, I don't want to celebrate anyone seeing their company go out of business, but it's, you want businesses built on a stable foundation. And if it's built on a dream that doesn't make sense, that's not a stable foundation. We saw a lot of that. I'm not speaking to your business, Edwin. I know nothing about it, but there were a lot of businesses in the late 90s. They were not well grounded, and at some point the bottom fell out.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom fell out of the business. The bottom fell out of financial markets. There was no access to equity. I mean, all kinds of things happen, and I don't know that I guess it could crash at the same time all that tariff money comes back into the economy, but right,
yeah,
that would be interesting. I don't know how you can model all the chaos that's out there these days.
Well, part of the problem, and again, we always have to deal with this, is that if let's hypothesize for a moment, it is a bubble, it's irrational. Question: where does it wind down? And we saw that with the tech bubble. We also saw that with the housing bubble. I mean, in 2005, 2006, I was going, this is crazy. It went on way longer than I would have expected. Now, part of that was it was very transparent. Of course, we're seeing some of this now with AI. The financing was utterly nuts. So we in fact, mortgage companies were bragging about it. We could lend nothing down. In fact, in some cases, people were getting loans 105% of the value of their house. They were getting money from moving costs or other costs associated with buying the house. And they were saying, "Oh, this is great. Look, we found ways to deal with the risk." Well, you didn't find ways to deal with the risk. You found ways to dump it off on other people. But at the end of the day, it came back to bite. Maybe not you. There were people who were selling it, made lots of money, and walked away. But at the end of the day, it was a big bite to a lot of homeowners that end up in foreclosure. Saw their prices, the house price, fall by 30, 40, 50%, even 60% in some cases. It obviously was a very bad story. So,
is
when
the
you get
banking
people
world
acting irrationally,
doing the same thing here? Is the funding for AI is as
it seems to be so. The classic story is circular finance, where you have a company like was it OpenAI, where it's stock valuation? Yeah, Oracle. They're crazy stock valuations, and they're lending the money to their customers to buy their products. So, what's the actual demand for their product? Well, as long as they're prepared to lend the money to the companies to buy their product, I guess it could be pretty good. But that's not real profit. If I lend you money to buy, whatever nutty thing I'm selling you, and then I go, "Oh, look at my great profit." Well, that's not real profit as we might ordinarily think of it. And
help me understand that better, because like GM loans people money to buy cars.
Yeah,
right? They do auto financing. And it's not quite, and that's worked for a long time. I guess in the 60s, the Brunswick company loaned people money to build bowling alleys. And when people stopped bowling, it was a huge problem. It's sort of more like... Yeah.
Yes. The question: are we talking about cars, or are we talking about bowling alleys? I guess.
Right.
If there's something where there's a clear value, and they don't just let anyone car loan. They want to see that you're buying a $40,000 car. They'll lend you $35 or whatever it might be. I haven't bought $40,000, but whatever. They'll lend you, some amount. So you have a stake in it. They check out your finances. That if you get they make sure you have insurance. So if your car's in a wreck, that they got their money back. So they have conditions on the loans, so most of the time those will pay off. Not always, obviously, but most of the times they'll pay off. But if they lend you something that's totally speculative, that, you're going to have this great product and you're going to make lots of money on it. Well, if it turns out you don't have this great product that'll make lots of money on, that loan's going to go bad. And the concern is that that's going to be a lot of these loans, and the Oracles and the big companies. They're going to end up, again, not that we need to shed tears for them, but this is that's a story of collapsing bubble. Their prices fall 30, 40, 50%. Go back to the tech bubble. The Nasdaq lost, I think it was 80% of its value, something close to 80% of its value from peak to trough. So I had a friend who was talking about this. He said, "Well, you have to be careful. You have to understand you can lose 10 to 20%. If there's a big downturn." I go, "Well, that's possible, but it could be 40 or 50." Again, I'm not making a prediction, but I'm just saying we've seen this. We've seen this this is an ancient history. I'm not going back to the 19th century. I'm going back 25 years. We've seen that.
It happened in the Trump administration with his favorite thing, right? He said, "We are going to be the crypto center of the world," and the Bitcoin prices rose phenomenally. And then he said, "I'm going to put 100% tariff on China," and they crashed and haven't recovered. And it was a huge crash.
Yeah, they're down about 30%. I think I'd have to double check what that exact figure is, but something like that. It's quite a fall off. So the idea that these markets could see sharp downturns, and obviously particular stocks really sharp downturns. People should know that. Again, I'm not making a prediction. I'm just saying, what's in the realm of the possible. That's in the realm of the possible.
So what do you think the experience of ordinary Americans, and I know that's a broad brush, but we got a midterm election this year, as we come out of the summer, what do you think people are going to be feeling?
Well, you have a lot of people hit by health care, and certainly the people who've lost the subsidies. That's over 20 million. So that's a big hit to those people. Healthcare costs have been rising more generally. So even if you're not, you aren't in that boat where you're in the exchanges and you see your subsidy go away, people are paying more for the healthcare, and that's a really big hit. Other things, what obviously matters to most people is their wages, and wage growth has slowed. And again, I'm concerned that's going to slow further. As it is, it's outpacing inflation a little bit, not a huge amount, but it is outpacing inflation, but that may change. Of course, it's not outpacing it for everyone. So the average wage growth has been about 3.5% over the last year. A lot of people are falling below. Inflation's around 3%, so a lot of people are falling below that. But even if you're just keeping even, that's not a great story. People expect to be coming out ahead, doing better. If we see the market crash, that's almost surely going to mean a recession. I mean, that's driving the economy. If suddenly, all this spending on data centers dries up and the power plants that they're building to provide them with energy, that's going to be a recession. So that we may well see that by November. I mean, if I had to place a bet, I'd say better than 50-50, and that's not going to be a pretty picture. Again, not to be morose, but the only thing I could say is I think the sooner it happens, the better, just because we're throwing good money after bad, at least in my book. If it doesn't pay, yeah.
Okay. I want to ask you about data again. The government's credibility is never been lower. So are you still confident that the quality of data that you get when you do your economic studies is sound?
Well, let me make two distinct points here. One is the question is, are they cooking it? And that's what we have to worry about most. And for now, I don't think they're cooking it. So, and again, that's just not casual. I mean, I think people on the inside would be telling us we'd see people quitting it. Yep. We haven't seen that. And I studied the data closely. There's nothing that's obviously out of line. The other point is, do we have the resources necessary to give us the data we need in a timely manner? And there have been cutbacks, and it's not as accurate. And the Consumer Price Index came out for November last month, and a lot of us were looking at it. And there were weird things. Now, I don't think there was any cooking. It's just they had to deal with a month where they didn't collect data. And, I and others were looking at it and we said, you got a weird number on rent. Again, it wasn't cooked. It's a problem. They studied it and people come to different conclusions.
People weren't there. Yeah.
Yeah, and as a result, I think they understated rental inflation for the year, maybe somewhere in the order of 0.1%, maybe 0.2%, because rent's such a large share of the CPI, that matters. There were a few other things like that. Again, I don't think any of it was cooking. It's just that they're tough calls. They don't have the resources. They were already under-resourced even before the shutdown, but the shutdown was very difficult. It's the first time they've had to deal with this, literally. My guess is since they started the Consumer Price Index early in the last century. So they had tough calls, and they made some mistakes in my view. So I worry about do they have the resources to provide the data we need? And in one case, there's a question on food adequacy. I'm forgetting how it's put exactly, and they just stopped collecting the data on that. Again. Obviously, Trump wasn't interested in getting it. It saves money, but that's, to my view, that's the kind of thing we would want. We have other data we could get comparable things, but it's just unfortunate. We do want to know how many people feel they're food insecure in the sense they don't know where they're going to get their meal from tomorrow. That's a big thing, and one of the data sets that answers that question has been discontinued.
Yeah, I mean, this is nothing to do with economics, but that feels particularly cruel to me that we don't even want to see our fellow citizens suffering a certain amount.
It's easy to be cynical about it. It's almost hard not to be. I mean, you cut back support, and then you say, but we're going to stop answering questions so we won't know how many people are suffering from it. I mean,
that's really terrible. Well, it's going to be another interesting year. And your profession, the dismal science, as we say, has got its hands full with all kinds of things from tariffs to trade to, weird but huge court decisions to possible new bubbles. I think you will not be bored this year.
Yeah, may you live in interesting times.
Right. Dean, thank you so much for spending part of the early part of this year with us, and I look forward to our next check-in.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on. Yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
You bet. Bye. All right, everybody. That was Dean Baker, and you can follow his work at the Center of Economic and Policy Research, and it is really terrific. I'm going to take a break and your calls when we come back.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid, on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody, I'm taking your calls at 773-763-9278. It's a new year, so I'm going to say it again. 773-763-9278. Jim, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Edwin. They had a young lady who put out a book this year, Imperialism and AI. And she points out in the book that they're going to need so much fossil fuel to burn these gargantuan plants around the world. So much coal they have to burn. They have to run 24/7 a day or they go out of business. Then she talks about how poorly the poor suckers that are working in these plants get paid. It's almost like when the Indians took over our bill collecting industry and they had just spasms of depression throughout who's ever doing the job. It's the same with this outfit. But this Sam Allman, who's the Pied Piper of this insanity, it's got it's going to the trillions now invested in this. And the problem, what it is it's the law of diminishing returns. Where they really have to turn to this with this stuff is the military industrial complex, not only in America, but all over China and so on, because they're going to be convinced that if they don't have the top intelligence, they won't be able to dominate the citizens around the world. And what kills me about this is it reminds me of Napoleon when he said one day, you've got all this military adventurism. He's like, always get cannon fodder. In other words, there's disposable human beings, a constant supply of disposable human beings. And in this effort by Trump, you mentioned the only ones that seem to be, we spent how many taxpayer dollars on this insane army running around with masks on, taking away immigrants with no. One guy got shot in the arm in California, a citizen, and he sued, but he couldn't complete it because they use that it's the government supremacy that's doing it. You can't sue. But if you were an actual policeman and shot somebody in the army, you get sued till the cows came home. But that and just this effort to deform the United States of America. I mean, it's just insane. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I don't know how they're going to explain this away. But as you said, is this the beginning before the midterms? Is it going to be Cuba? Are they going to decapitate Cuba? Or are they going to decapitate, you name it, Finland? I mean, if they don't give us Greenland, we'll capture their government, and hold them hostage until they give us Greenland?
Yeah.
Yeah. For what? Because Edwin, man does not live by bread alone. Please believe me. I know that at 75. I know that man does not live by bread alone. And I can swear that on my mother and father's grave. Nobody could exist like that. If we thought everything was dollars and cents, it'd be just the most miserable world you can imagine. Anyway, you have a great New Year's, and thank you, Edwin.
Thank you. I really appreciate your continuing to be part of this. I do. Dave, you're next.
Hey, Edwin. Welcome back.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year to you also. With that, I consider that what Trump and them did, it kidnapped Maduro. Especially when he took his wife and him.
They certainly kidnap people off our streets in Chicago. So it's not out of character. At least this guy, unlike the people they were taking off our streets, this guy had been indicted for some serious crimes. Which you can't say about a lot of the people they took off our streets.
Yeah, I just found it kind of amusing, though, with all the stuff Trump was saying about Maduro. It's kind of like the pot calling the kettle black there, But
the poor Venezuelans traded one dictator for another.
Yeah, who's going to be the governor general now? Venezuela, I don't know, but I haven't heard none of the talking heads on that talking about them. What about those 5 Americans that were detained about a day or two before this went down?
Yeah, there's so many good questions that we don't know the answers to, that they seemed unprepared to talk about. I mean, the military said, look, we were just there to support law enforcement action. It's a lot of military to support a law enforcement action. And, America's military is very powerful and well-trained, and they succeeded in doing it. But they didn't say, we're here to take over a country. But the president did. It's ours. We run it.
Yeah. Well,
utter BS.
Like Colin Powell had said that one time, you break the pottery, you bought it. And we haven't been very good at, after the fact, looking at what...
No, terrible. Colonialism, it turns out, is not a great idea.
No.
Yeah.
And Trump wasn't such a coward back in the Vietnam time. He could have won the war much
by
earlier.
Himself.
Probably about 25,000.
On the battlefield.
Yeah, about 25,000 people that probably would still be alive today if we would have had him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
all right.
Well, let me clear off, Edward, so others can get their.
All right. Well, good
again.
to talk to you. A happy New Year.
You too. Let's have a safe one. Okay.
You bet. All right, Paul. We got a lot on your mind, I bet, after last night.
Well, when my phone woke me up in the middle of the night or early this morning with that notification, I was furiously pissed. I jumped out of bed and I cussed. I just cussed this a-hole president in this country because I'm so sick of this. And this whole idea that he's prosecuting Maduro is BS. Because if this were really all about that, every one of those boats that he blew up, they would have commandeered and towed into harbor as evidence. There would be a whole harbor full of them.
Yeah.
And they say, see, we got this and this and this. And this all comes from you, buddy. And yet they blew up all the evidence. There's not a shred of evidence. Actually, I don't think this is going to be, he's a dictator, but like every other case, I was just talking to a friend of mine earlier this morning about another lawyer friend of mine about how the Trump administration, by talking about what they did, they just destroy every case that they think are going to prosecute, is by talking about it, from the shootings to whatever. It's like they don't know how to shut up. It's like they just don't. But I agree with Jim. AI is a bad genie, and it's out of the bottle, and its only purpose is to control people. We don't need supercomputing that has unlimited data. And what AI will do will be, I was just watching that original episode of the original Star Trek series, M5, the computer, the supercomputer that was self-perpetuating, and it was out for itself and destroying the other starships they were having war games. It was like, oh, hey, he's firing full phasers at us. What the heck? It's the new computer, the M5. And that's what it's for. And that's what it's all about. And why is it all about that? Is because the rich can't get enough. The rich can't get enough money. They're the morbidly rich. Like Tom Hartman says, they've become complete Uber hoses. They suck up everything. They can't get enough. No, and we should just be. We are their fodder. We are their fodder. There will come a point where they will have to need us. Or what kind of world do they think they're going to live in once they destroyed everybody? I don't know, but this is infuriating. And I don't know without. I love what you said about. They consulted the American oil companies, but not Congress. Well, I've already called my lawmakers, my representatives, and said not a penny for the occupation of Venezuela. Not a penny.
Yeah, there's a War Powers Act going through right now. We'll see what happens. It's going to be up for a vote next week.
Well, yeah, and you notice that we didn't have this wasn't quite like Iraq because remember leading up to Iraq, we had Colin Powell giving this big speech about weapons of mass destruction and UN 1442. They're in violation of that, but we didn't have any of that. This is just bravery.
No, this is just the king doing what the king does. And this year, patriots and believers in each other and democracy have to do what we do. And I think we are stronger, even though he is very powerful, very dangerous, very vindictive, and eager to use lethal force. Because, I mean, did you see Pete Hegseth? Did you see how excited he was to talk about how powerful we are? I mean, okay, we've spent decades developing the most powerful military on the planet. Great. Let's use it for good. He doesn't care. He just wants to use it.
There's nothing worse than a drunk who is drunk with power.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what that's what the whole thing is about, is that when they feel that way, they feel invincible. And now he really is, huh?
Yeah, it was disgusting.
We'll see.
All right. Well, Paul, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I hope that your new year gets off to a great start.
You too. Happy New Year.
Yeah. Max, what's on your mind today?
Hi. So Happy New Year. But,
you too,
Max. I'm looking at this, and I don't know if people, have noticed, but, people need to start thinking about, how much money this costs us. Remember the Iraq war was, I think it was $4.5 trillion. And then, we lost, I think, 7,500 Americans and 8,000, I don't know how many of them were Americans, contractors, so about 15,000 people altogether. And then that's not including the wounded and then the suicide numbers. You look up the suicide numbers, I'm not kidding, they're over 32,000. And people, that's like, wow. No, look it up, you'll see that. That's just from the Iraq and Afghan war. Okay, so this right here, what I've read, and you could read, and it comes up with different numbers, but according to what I read, it was $1 billion a day. It took them 2 years. It was $1 billion a day. They had 27,000 troops out there, standing out there in the waters or on islands and stuff like that. They were, paying for all that. And whether it was that much or not is still a lot of money. If you look at it there, you could go to the U.S. The U.S., because I noticed this before, so I had to look it up again, and it's called debt to the penny. And you could go and you could look at the history of how we spend our money, and you'll notice that last year we spent in 88 days $1 trillion. I'm not kidding. You look it up, you got to do the math on it. And then I remember, I didn't do the math. Someone told me that, okay, but a good friend. But I actually did it when Bush Jr. was in office, and he actually, in 88 days, right before they were changing over presidency, he spent $1 trillion in about 88 days or less. Okay, and people, wow, 88 days. And at the same time, go to?
At the same time, they gave tax cuts so that all that spending never got paid for and just became debt. And that's what Trump did too. Let's spend more, let's collect less, and let's go on social media and say the Democrats are crazy spenders. I've had it with them, as everybody has. These are really good points, Max. I'm appreciative that you brought them. I'm gonna keep going because a lot of people called in today because it's New Year's, I guess. But Happy New Year to you, Max. Nelton, you're next.
Hi, how are you? It's Nelton.
Yep. Nelton, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Chicago.
Good. Love Chicago.
Yeah. What I want to say is that this is not new in the history of man. However, this is a lot worse because the drug trade out of Venezuela could not have been fed and fueled unless the American market didn't supply it, one. Two, this is not about Maduro. This is about confiscating another country's resources, their oil. America went in years ago, helped Venezuelans get their oil out the ground. They feel obligated to. They feel that they're owed it. They feel that the oil and resources are owed to America. This is wrong. This is a ploy for Trump and the Republican Party to try to bring down prices on oil, thinking it's going to generate prices coming down on everything else, and it's not. It's not. So what this is actually is just a rogue government taking over a much, much smaller government with armed forces, taking their resources, which man has done, not just Republicans, but Democrats, not just America, but all over the world. Unfortunately, this stinks.
I couldn't agree with you more, Nelton. I mean, the whole history of colonialism, you think of the minerals that were taken from Central African countries and the damage, terrible damage that caused.
Everything.
You know, and what India did what China did, what Britain did in
King
India.
Leopold.
King Leopold in the Congo. Terrible stuff. And you know, they said, oh, you know, we are bringing civilization to these parts of the world. We're building roads, we're building hospitals, we're building schools. It was nonsense. They were building railroads not to help build economies, but to help extract resources that ended up profiting people on the other side of the planet. And that is what Donald Trump wants to do in Venezuela. He wants to take the oil and help himself get reelected, but also make money for people who've been helping him stay in power.
Yes, and you know, I believe in God, and I'm asking sometimes, where is God? Come on, where is He? How can this stuff just continue in the world? A lot of these people in these countries are innocent.
I agree with you.
A lot of people are innocent. A lot of people haven't done anything.
I don't know where God is, but I know where He is not. He is not sitting in the dining hall of Mar-a-Lago.
No, he's not. No, he's not. This man is one step away from being the devil to me. I mean, it's a shame. It's shame on America, not just for this act, but many acts. But I'm going to say this and I'm going to get off. They said it's in the word, man reaps what he's sown. The part they have kept out, so shall a nation.
That is true, and that is why we are going to toss him out, because I think we are better than this. But we have to prove it this year. Boy, do we have to prove it. Thank you, Elton. I really appreciate it. Let's see. Greg.
Yeah, hi, Edwin. Thanks for taking my call. The reason I'm calling today, we're talking about the Venezuelan oil. And the funny thing about that, we're probably close in age. I'm about 68. I remember back in the times when Venezuela wanted they wanted to sell their oil to us. But at that time, we sneered at it and said, it's junk oil, and here's a description of it. It's only like 2 sentences. Venezuelan oil is generally not considered high grade. It's predominantly heavy, sour crude from the Orinoco Belt, which is dense, tar-like, high in sulfur, and difficult, costly to extract and refine, requiring specialized refineries and often blending with lighter oils, thus selling at a discount compared to lighter, sweeter crudes. Sounds like the stuff from Canada.
I'm practically laughing. And, I've already broken the rules twice, and my board ops have had to bleep what's come out of my mouth because it's radio. But this dumb blank, it just the things that comes out of his mouth. He is the worst president in American history, the most dangerous, and the dangers are now being shared by people all over the world. The era of America standing for good in the world is over. I'm embarrassed. It's heartbreaking, I'm not Pollyannish about our history. We didn't do everything right, but generally we've been a force for good. Generally, generally we have stood on the side of people and democracy. Not always, God knows, and we have overcome in time our the worst in us and have improved, expanding our franchise, lifting people out of poverty all over the world. And God knows that is all over now. All of that is done. We stand for nothing except, can we make the king richer? It's just repulsive.
Can I ask one question before I leave? And I know other people are hanging. Do you remember the movie or the book, The Omen, either one?
The Omen, vaguely. Yeah.
Okay. One of the lines or the scenes from that movie, I read the book and I saw the movie, but I remember they were talking about the Antichrist. Let's say that's a guy who is currently our president, just for the sake of discussion. He was born begot not from a female of our species, but rather a female of the jackal family. I always thought that was interesting, and then through his life, people guarded his way and protected him till his ascent to the throne was ready. And I just keep thinking of all these people in his cabinet and the people who got him where he's at. And it's like that story, whether or not you believe it or not, I don't know what I just thought it's a very good parallel. I'll hang up, but Happy New Year.
Thank you for sharing it, Craig. Happy New Year. Yep. I'm at 773-763-9278 if you want to join the conversation. I want to, what do I want to say? I want to frame this new year. I am not in a panic about our future, even though I know it's going to be hard. We have a huge fight on our hands, but it's as clear as day what that fight is. Right? All these times it was not so clear. He was pretending to be one thing, then he was another thing. Now we know. We know. We really do. All right, Roosevelt, let's bring us to the end here. I know you got something helpful for me.
Double E, first of all, Happy New Year. Okay,
you too.
So, I know I just sent you a couple of reports. As of 45 minutes ago, the VP of Venezuela just gave the middle finger to the United States and Trump in particular, meaning she's not going to conform, she's not going to comply with the takeover of her country. So, I believe that he's going to put boots on the ground. I believe that he's going to attack Venezuela. What do you think of that? And I also send you in the press conference. He was asked a question about Mexico, which I've been bugging you for weeks.
You've been telling me. Yep.
And look what's going to happen. Did you hear his answer? Did you pay attention to what he said? It's not the first time he has said that. He said that the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, is not in control of her country, that the cartels are, and the fentanyl. All the things that I have been telling you for weeks. That's going to be the excuse because that's exactly what he did in Venezuela. He started with the drugs and the boats. What does Mexico have? Same thing Venezuela has. Lots of oil. What do you think of that?
Well, we don't have a president of Mexico who's been indicted in a U.S. court.
Okay.
That's a big difference. And remember, when you listened to not all of the political guys, but when you listened to Kane, who was the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he did all of the bowing and scraping he was supposed to do. But he also said, look, the only reason this mission was very clear, we were simply providing cover for for law enforcement to bring somebody to justice in the U.S. I think that it'd be harder to do this adventurism. I know that the president would be happy to do it. Oh, look, there's something I want. I can take it. I have power. I know the Secretary of Defense would be happy. He is thrilled in a way that is kind of creepy about the use of power. You know, the use of the ability to kill people. But Americans aren't going to put up with it, Roosevelt. I mean, that Americans, I bet you by, what day is today? Saturday? I bet you by Wednesday, we will have good polling that says like 8% of Americans think this was a good idea. You know, and I mean, and his poll numbers are going to continue to go down. His triumphal march, that crazy press conference today, we control Venezuela. Seriously, like.
But Lee, can I interrupt you for a minute? I've been trying to interrupt you here, and I'm sorry I am.
No, of course. I was going on.
What you're missing though is from the get-go, the president of Mexico supported Venezuela as recent as today or yesterday.
Yes,
if I'm not mistaken.
I know.
She has also she's condemned all of the actions that Marco Rubio has taken. However, she's done it in a very diplomatic way. As recent as today, I just got a video interview, of course in Spanish, where she says we have good conversations with the United States. And the reporter asked her specifically, what do you think about what the president said this morning? And she answered that we have communication with the president, very diplomatic. He doesn't want to, add on to the situation. But in the back of her mind, she's got to think he's got the perfect reasons, and I do mean reasons, to attack and go into Mexico. One is the drugs, two is the oil, and three, the fact that she's a woman. She's not respected by this president. We all
Jewish
know.
Woman.
Exactly. But you're heading to, I was getting ready to say, a minority in Mexico, which is Jewish, a woman.
Yeah. Oh, look, I don't put anything past this president, but the other thing, I just don't put anything past us, the American people. Okay. I think that he's going to try and do all the terrible things you think he could do, and he just might have one that is worse than what you think, and it's going to step in line in front of what you think he's going to do, because you are not crazy enough or evil enough to think about the things he's going to do. He's going to do them. He's going to figure it out, and he's going to do them. But we are, I think we just don't view morality and power as synonymous with, I can kill you. That's how a mobster views power. That is not how a great nation views power. And we are not a nation of mobsters. We like to see them in the movies, and we got one in the White House, and every day that becomes more clear to Americans, his poll numbers drop. And we are going to protect our franchise, and we're going to vote in numbers like he's never seen. We'll control of Congress, and eventually we will be done with this man, and we will start to rebuild our nation. And you know what? I think we could retire the national debt again by paying. By inviting people to pay a fee to sit there as we chisel his name off Trump Tower in Chicago and chisel his name off the Kennedy Center in Washington and assign those letters to the ash heap they belong in. That'll take care. Anyway, I've just run us out of time, Roosevelt. I'm sorry. And to all of you who are listening, I apologize for running on. We'll pick up the conversation again next week. Thank you for spending the time with me. Thank you for launching your new year with me together. And wherever you are on January 6th, take a moment to be grateful that we got through that day and the people who got us through it. Thank you.